One quiet afternoon on an old wooden bridge, three large, aggressive dogs came charging out of nowhere, snarling and snapping as they lunged toward a little girl. But in the very instant danger touched the air, from behind a thicket just off the path, a German shepherd leapt out, its body cutting through the air like a shield forged from instinct and fury, landing squarely between the girl and her attackers, teeth bared in a deep, guttural growl that sent the air vibrating. No one could say where he had come from, only that for nearly 10 kilometers he had been silently trailing her, step for step, like a shadow with a mission. Why would a dog choose to protect a child he'd never met? What follows may just change how you understand loyalty. Stay until the end to find out why. Mornings in Ash Willow never arrived in haste. They always drifted in quietly, veiled in a soft gray mist that wrapped itself around the still surface of the lake, like a lullaby that never ended. A thin layer of fog, light as bridal lace, floated past the rusted rooftops and settled over the gravel road that disappeared into the folds of old briarwood forest. The first light didn't strike like a blade. It folded gently through the treetops like silk, laying down over the damp, mossy leaves that still held on to the breath of night. A small bicycle moved slowly through the heart of the forest, its tires crunching the path in soft rhythm, the chain clicking faintly in time with the shallow breaths of a little girl leaning forward to balance her weight. She wore a faded green coat, worn but clean, and strapped to her back was a canvas backpack tilted to one side, patched with a sunflower sticker that had begun to peel at the edges, like a crooked little smile. Sophie didn't sing. She didn't even smile. Beneath the brim of a dark baseball cap, her face was turned downward, fixed on the narrow dirt path ahead, a trail knotted with roots and blanketed in dry leaves, just wide enough for her bike to pass, leading from her grandmother's cabin back to the small wooden house perched at the edge of town. Grown-ups often said this road was too quiet for a child to travel alone, but Sophie had grown used to the silence, to the way it made space for wind and rustling leaves instead of voices. Her mother once told her, "Where there are trees, there's always a place to hide." And ever since the last time she heard her mother's voice, barely a whisper in the hospital room, Sophie had clung to those words like the last thing she still owned that hadn't yet slipped away. The bike wobbled slightly as it passed over a raised root, and Sophie steadied herself with one foot on the ground. She paused, inhaled quietly, and glanced around, just as she always did whenever the forest fell too suddenly still. No birdsong, no squirrels, only wind, and something else. Something that felt like it was behind her. Sophie turned. At first there was nothing, just the dim shimmer of mist catching morning light. But then, at the far edge of what her eyes could reach, a shape began to take form. A large dog, motionless, half lost in the haze. Its coat was thick and rough, the color of ash laced with gold, ears pointed upright, eyes lit like twin embers at dusk. It didn't move, it didn't approach, it simply stood there, watching. Her grip tightened around the handlebars, and a shiver passed through her shirt that wasn't from the cold, but from the strange feeling of being seen all the way through. And yet, those eyes didn't look at her the way predators do, nor did they tremble like a creature afraid. Number that gaze, steady, quiet, patient, felt like it belonged to someone who had once stood at the edge of life and death, and now simply waited, as if for permission. Sophie turned back and began pedaling again, slightly faster now, her wheels pressing shallow tracks into the damp earth. Behind her, the faint rustle of dry leaves stirred. Not in a hurry, not in threat, but with a deliberate rhythm, distant yet steady. The dog was following her, not close, not far. just enough to stay in sight without becoming a shadow. Sophie didn't scream. She wasn't the kind of girl who screamed. But she did pedal harder, her chest tightening, not purely from fear, but from the unfamiliar weight of being watched. Silently, and perhaps also because something in those eyes felt familiar. The forest path stretched nearly 8 kilometers, winding over 2 soft inclines, across an old wooden bridge spanning a shallow stream, and past a crooked sign nailed to a leaning tree. The words, handwritten in white paint, read, "Toward the light." Sophie had once laughed when she first saw it. It felt like something plucked from the end of a fairy tale. Today, she didn't laugh. As her bike rolled onto the bridge, the wind picked up, whistling through the warped planks with a low, reedy hum that echoed faintly like a distant flute. She didn't look back, but she could feel the rhythm of 4 footsteps behind her more clearly now. Rex, that had once been his name, kept walking, his gait soft, his presence quiet. No one had spoken that name since the day he was decommissioned. No one had looked into his eyes and remembered the rescue drills, the sharp commands, the blizzards in the northern mountains where he had once been the first to leap into danger. No one recalled the scar that ran from his left flank down to his rear joint, a silent medal from the day he didn't back away when the world came crashing down. No one called for him again, and so he never stopped moving. But today, in the hush of old Briarwood, he saw a small figure, thin, still, silent, so much like the way he had once stood, alone in the rain at a checkpoint long since buried by snow. And so, he followed. Not to chase, not to corner, but to hold a distance, just enough to guard, never enough to frighten. Sophie looked back one more time as the bike slowed where the first rays of sunlight began to touch the ground. She saw his shadow beneath a maple tree. It didn't move. Just a silhouette. But it didn't disappear. Ahead lay the forest's edge, where the light grew stronger and the fields of ash willow emerged through a curtain of pale mist. Beyond that was the little wooden house with the blue roof, where she lived with her father. But she didn't ride toward it, not yet. She stopped by the roadside, her foot resting gently on the dew-covered grass. And in that pause, the footsteps behind her came to a stop as well. No heavy breath, just a stillness so deep it made the world feel as if it had stopped turning. Sophie turned slowly. The German shepherd had sat down, not advancing, not retreating, just sitting, his thick fur rippling in the wind, each strand rising like blades of grass answering the breeze. And though no words were spoken, something passed between them in that silence. Something old, something true. And those eyes, still as bright as the flicker of young flame, were now looking straight at her, no longer from afar, and yet not too near either. Just close enough for Sophie, for the very first time, to see the long scar that ran beneath the left hind leg, a scar that had long since healed but still remained etched there, as if whispering a quiet story from a place unimaginably distant. Sophie lowered her head, slightly, without knowing why. Perhaps it was courtesy. Perhaps it was because she suddenly realized no one had ever followed her this long, with such unwavering patience, without once asking for anything in return. A bicycle bell rang faintly from somewhere down the road, someone from the town drawing near. And in the instant Sophie turned to look toward the sound, then back again. The dog was no longer where it had been. The old maple tree by the roadside stood still, sunlight slipping softly through its dry branches to form slender threads of gold stretched across the damp ground, rich with the scent of moss and decay. But in the place where the dog had just sat, there now remained only the faint imprint of 4 paws, overlapping in a small arc, as if it had simply been waiting for the right gaze to fall upon it before it could move on. Not out of fear, but in quiet confirmation of something essential, something necessary. Farther down, where the line of pine trees began to dip into the valley, the shadow was moving. Not hurriedly, not erratically. Each step measured, deliberate, as though it already knew every stone, every patch of sunken earth, every root that jutted from the ground like memory made solid. Its name was Rex, or at least that was the name once fastened to the black leather collar it used to wear, the one with the small, worn metal tag inscribed with barely legible letters. Rex, Unit 7K9, Rescue North Division. No one had spoken that name since the unit disbanded. The base was erased from maps, and the mission records filed away in the archive drawer of operations that never reached their end. Years ago, Rex had run across white snow like a wind that listened, lunging into the landslides of the northern plateau to catch the faintest trace of a child buried deep beneath the rocks, then turning back, barking loud into a blizzard that no soldier could stand upright against. In its ears, the shrill sound of a signal horn. Behind it, the voice of its handler calling its name again and again. And ahead, only the scent of blood, the staleness of smoke and stone, and the faint, fading warmth of a life not yet gone. It once had a name, a warm, sleeping place, and a trainer who knew exactly how it always turned its head twice before sitting down. But a fracture along its left flank, from the time it hurled itself through the charred rafters of a burning wooden roof, a wound that had seemed to heal, left it permanently limping. And so, after the endurance test at the end of that final year, Rex was no longer part of the active team. A small transport truck carried it away from camp, with no one there to say goodbye, no words left behind, only a transfer form and the sound of a collar being unclipped at a gas station halfway down the road. It wandered into the southern suburbs, passed through 3 towns, endured 2 cold fevers, and more than once curled beneath strangers' porches just to stay dry. It had once tried knocking on the door of a police station, using the same trained motion it had learned to call out to its teammates, but received only wary stares and the sound of footsteps stepping away. Eventually, Rex stopped knocking. It learned how to sit behind fences, how not to step onto porches unless called, how to sniff out fear and back away before being driven off. But the instinct to protect never left, just like the way a fallen tree will still hold its roots to the ground, no longer upright, but never truly severed. That morning, deep in the old briarwood forest, Rex had seen the girl, a small backpack slipping off one shoulder, her old bicycle brushing past roots, and eyes that, even in a fleeting glance, did not look away. It followed her not out of curiosity, but because it had caught a scent, something fragile yet familiar, something suspended delicately between uncertainty and a trace of courage. There was no gunpowder, no scent of emergency, but something in the air felt like a call without command, to a mission never assigned. And that was enough for Rex to stay. It watched Sophie the whole way, maintaining a distance just right, close enough to leap in 3 bounds if needed, but far enough not to frighten anyone. Other bicycles didn't matter. The flutter of sparrows overhead didn't make it flinch. But each time Sophie paused to check her path or wipe her brow, Rex also stopped. And every time her tires skidded in loose sand, it held its breath, waiting for her next move. Rex didn't know the girl's name, but its gaze, the same gaze once trained to receive orders, chart directions, and define safe zones, now needed only one thing: to protect. No reason, no reward, no need to be seen. That night, when Sophie stood at the window, with light from inside spilling gently over the grass, Rex remained still beneath the chestnut tree, unmoving. It knew she was watching, knew that her hand had touched the glass. But it didn't approach. Between them stretched a respectful space, not a boundary, but a distance of understanding. One it had once been trained to keep in any environment involving children. It had been taught that a child senses intrusion quicker than any adult, and so, instead of drawing attention, one should choose to appear regularly, like a rhythm, a quiet habit, so that when the other finally opens their heart, the first thing they'll remember is a presence that never asked to be let in. That night, Rex lay on the soft earth behind the lilac bush, head resting between its front paws, eyes half closed. It did not dream. Dogs who have faced life and death often do not. But sometimes, the image of a burning rooftop, a scream through the earpiece, or the dust-covered eyes of a child being lifted from the rubble, still came rushing back like the last light before dawn. When the moon, thin as thread, passed over the rooftop and glinted faintly on the old metal tag rising and falling with each breath, Rex heard the soft groan of floorboards inside, the sound of someone walking across wooden planks in the hush of night. And then, the porch door opened. Sophie stood there, a light jacket wrapped around her shoulders, holding a cup of warm milk that still let off steam. She stepped quietly down the stairs, unaware of the figure hidden in the brush, yet her eyes still turned instinctively in that direction, where Rex lay silent, eyes still closed, ears gently raised. No words were spoken, but they were both there. Rex didn't give chase. Instead, he lowered his head, gently licking the wound along his leg, then began to walk, slowly, steadily, toward the bridge, his steps quiet, as if he understood that whatever needed to happen had already passed. The morning sun filtered softly through the high canopy above, carving arcs of gold across the weathered wooden slats. Each beam of light stretched like an underground stream briefly surfaced in the heart of the forest. And from the far end of that bridge, from the place where Sophie had just disappeared around the bend, something small dropped onto the wood. A plastic keychain shaped like a smiling face. Rex paused mid-step, brought his nose close, sniffing the tiny thing that now lay alone on the bridge. It carried no scent of food, no trace of anything that would normally spark the instincts of a dog. But beneath the resin surface, he caught faint hints of pencilwood, of paper, and the barely there touch of a child's hands, the kind of scent only creatures who had once lived close to humans could recognize without hesitation. He didn't bite it, didn't pick it up. He simply lowered his head once more, touched his nose gently to it, and then turned, quietly, deliberately, away from the bridge. Behind him, the sun rose higher, and the light spilled through the branches in waves of changing color, pale at first, then deepening into amber, like stained glass unfolding with each passing second. Sophie shoved the front door open fast, her hand slick with sweat and dirt, her breath jagged and broken into quick, shallow bursts, the kind of breathing that comes only after you've run across a field with no time to stop and no one to tell you it's okay to rest. Inside, Caleb was standing at the sink, a mug of coffee still in his hand, and he turned immediately at the sound of the door slamming, surprised because it was rare to see his daughter come home looking like this. She stood on the entry rug, hair disheveled, sleeves unevenly rolled, and a thin streak of red beginning to dry along her left shin. She didn't speak at first, just stared at him with wide, unblinking eyes that weren't crying, but somehow seemed clearer than usual, as if something inside them had been swept clean. Caleb set the mug on the wooden table and approached, lifting his hand slowly to rest it on her shoulder, but hesitated when she instinctively took a small step back. He didn't scold her, didn't barrage her with questions. He only extended his hand again, this time more gently, and lowered his voice. "What happened on the way home?" Sophie nodded, her throat tightening for a moment like it was filled with something too large to swallow. Then she managed a few words, broken but vivid. 3 dogs. The bridge. One was bigger. It jumped out. Caleb's brow furrowed, his hand clenched softly into a fist. He'd heard town kids talk about the Rottweilers from that house north of Cedar Road, unleashed, half feral, the same ones that caused trouble at the sports field last season. But what struck him wasn't the 3 dogs. It was the mention of one bigger. He knelt to examine the scrape on Sophie's leg, then said in a low, even tone, "Go wash up. I'll check the cameras." That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Caleb stood alone in the yard, his eyes drawn toward the outline of old briarwood beyond the last picket of fence. He hadn't said a word to her about what he found on the video, didn't describe the large shadow, didn't ask about the missing smiley face keychain from her backpack. But he did begin mending the broken part of the fence behind the house, the section that bordered the narrow side alley, where soft soil still held faint imprints. Prints that didn't match any known animal entirely, as if they fell somewhere between a cat's paw and a man's boot. And when he was nearly finished fixing the slats, he froze for a moment, not because of a sound, but because of something caught at the base of a fence post. A long strand of fur, grayish ash in color, the tip still caked in a bit of drying mud. He lifted it carefully, rotating it under the porch light. The fibers shimmered faintly, catching the gold hue like tarnished brass. He didn't speak. He just stepped into the shed, pulled out a small Ziploc bag, placed the fur inside, and clipped it to a corner shelf beside a half-disassembled pile of electronics waiting to be repaired. He labeled it with a piece of paper. Morning of October 9th, behind the fence. The night crept in like a thick wool blanket. Autumn wind whispered more sharply through the slats, and the sound of leaves dropping onto the tin roof behind the house came with a rhythmic certainty, like footsteps made of memory. Rex lay beside a tree near the fence line, his eyes open, unmoving. The wound along his leg had stopped bleeding, but every time he shifted his weight to the left, a dull ache still throbbed quietly beneath the skin. He didn't whine, didn't lick the cut again. He simply stayed still, still as driftwood washed ashore, occasionally turning one ear in the direction of the house, toward the upper window where a soft amber glow spilled out. He could see her. Sophie was standing there. She didn't wave, didn't open the window. She just looked, and after a moment, turned away. But before the light disappeared completely, the window creaked open, just slightly, so quiet it didn't even disturb the leaves. On the windowsill, something small was gently placed. Another keychain, shaped like a sunflower. The night breeze glided across the porch, brushing past the little token and nudging it ever so slightly, making the plastic tap faintly against the glass, the softest sound, like an exhale caught in the hush between sleep and dreaming. Down in the yard, beneath the scattered shadows of lilac trees, Rex lifted his head, eyes locked on that windowsill where the last light shimmered around the new gift. He didn't move toward it, didn't whimper, just sat, slowly, purposefully, and raised his gaze as if that simple upward look was the only thank you he'd ever needed to know. Inside, the bedroom light went out, but a faint glow from the hallway still cast a soft outline on the wall behind Sophie. She didn't look back again, not out of fear, but because something in her already knew. He was still there. Rex remained in place for a long time after that, ears gently lowered, body still but gaze steady. Only when the wind shifted, carrying with it the smoky scent of burnt toast from a neighbor's kitchen, did he finally stir, lowering himself to the cool earth beside the small flower bed that had yet to bloom. Night fell slowly over Ash Willow, like a thick blanket drawn carefully over every roof, every fence, every blade of grass. The air dimmed into silence, thinning the world of its noise until only the sound of distant insects remained, soft, rhythmic, like the forest's own heartbeat, beating somewhere far beyond sight. Rex didn't sleep. He rested. But one ear stayed lifted, always. As if in every dream, he'd made room for watchfulness. Around 3 a.m, the first sound broke the silence, not loud, but sharp enough to split the air into 2 distinct pulses. The back door of the house creaked open. Slowly, gently, and with an unmistakable sense of purpose. Caleb stood in the doorway, one hand gripping a hickory cane, his frame wrapped in a heavy, earth-brown coat. He did not step out right away. He only stood there, watching. The porch light, dim and flickering, cast a pale glow across his face, revealing not the usual weariness drawn in lines, but a tension buried deeper, beneath the skin, behind the eyes, in the quiet discipline of a man who was holding calm with both hands, tightly. Rex didn't move, didn't growl, didn't retreat. He merely turned his head, his gaze locking with the man's, not heavy with threat, not softened by submission, but instead burning with something in between, something balanced on the edge between presence and restraint. Respect. Caleb took 1 step forward, stopping at the second stair. His hand still held the cane, though he didn't raise it. His eyes dropped to the dried blood caked around the dog's left leg. He noticed the way the animal stood motionless, not frozen by fear, but composed by choice. "So it's you," he said, not loudly, just a whisper, low enough that it may have been meant only for his own ears. Rex lifted his head just slightly. His eyes didn't blink. Caleb exhaled slowly, never breaking his stare, and then lowered the cane to the wooden floor. The sound of it meeting the boards rang out softly, like a second breath let go. He didn't turn his back. He simply remained a moment longer, then stepped inside, leaving the door behind him slightly ajar. And it was not by accident. Rex didn't follow, but he didn't leave either. By the time the sky began to warm into shades of rose, when the sun had not yet climbed beyond the eastern ridge, Sophie was already awake. She did not rush to rise. She sat quietly, knees pulled to her chest, eyes fixed through the pane of glass left slightly open since the night before. The keychain still rested where she had left it on the windowsill, now beaded with morning dew that caught the light and gleamed like a drop of golden honey suspended in time. She stepped out of her room, barefoot, her footsteps featherlight down the hallway. They made no sound loud enough to wake the grown-ups. When she opened the back door, the outside poured in, the scent of damp earth, the hush of trees, and something else too. The unmistakable feeling of a presence that asked for nothing but was undeniably there. Rex was still there. Lying still beside the flower bed, head resting on his front paws, eyes half closed, though one ear twitched gently as the hinges creaked. Sophie said nothing. She stepped onto the porch, sitting down on the low stone step. In her hand was a half-eaten sandwich, not a lure, just something she happened to carry with her. Rex opened his eyes. He didn't spring forward, didn't lean in. He simply pressed down with his forelegs, slowly rising to his feet, lifting his injured leg slightly to balance, and looked at her, not with expectation, only awareness. She set the sandwich beside her on the step, then turned her face away, as if it had been placed there by chance, for no one in particular. Rex stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, unhurried, free of hesitation. He didn't eat immediately. He brought his nose close, inhaled once, then gently picked up the remaining piece, not a crumb left behind. The girl didn't look back, but a small curve rose at the corner of her lips, as though the morning breeze had carried in a taste that pleased her. Behind them, the back door still hung slightly open, yet no one stepped through. But from inside, the quiet click of a kettle's power switch echoed softly, a sign that one of the adults had stirred. Rex finished eating, and this time, he didn't walk away like the night before. He sat down again. His gaze turned toward the backyard, where the stone path led to a narrow alley lined with lilacs just beginning to bloom. And from that alley, from the bend where the path met the edge of the woods, there came a small movement, the figure of an old woman with silver hair, walking slowly, bent slightly forward, leading a small dog on a leash. Her pace was unhurried, her form stooped, but her eyes were sharp. She stopped at the fence and looked across. Sophie didn't yet recognize Mrs. Landon, the former neighbor who once kept 3 long-haired cats. But Rex stood up, body taut, not in menace but in recognition. Mrs. Landon squinted, her aged eyes fixed on Rex, and she let out a short, quiet breath. Her grip on the leash tightened. Then she turned and walked away. And as she disappeared behind the curve of the alley, her hand pulled out a phone. Ashwillow was a small town, and phone calls from people like Mrs. Landon were never dismissed lightly. The townsfolk here still kept their windows open in the morning to hear the birds, still watered their gardens by hand, still preferred seeing each other at the produce store over any screen. But precisely because of that, every unfamiliar movement, every anomaly, however small, was noticed and retold, more than once, by more than one person. 15 minutes later, the call was forwarded to the Regional Animal Control Unit. A white pickup truck with a faded dog bone logo began circling the town, then turned onto the narrow road leading to the elementary school. The woman in the passenger seat, wearing a dark blue uniform, notebook in hand, asked into the radio, "What color is the dog?" Mrs. Landon replied flatly, "Gray. Big, long fur, unfriendly face." "Near the school?" "Right on the edge of the grounds, behind the bushes by the field." "Any sign of aggression?" "Number. But it looks like it's waiting for something." Rex wasn't waiting for anything. He had chosen that spot behind the bush because it was the only patch of shade thick enough to shield him from the harsh sunlight pouring down from above the flagpole. The schoolyard was full of noise now. Children were running, shouting, balloons bounced off the fences, whistles pierced the air. Rex kept his eyes on the side gate, the one Sophie entered through each morning on her bicycle. He didn't step closer, didn't cross the faded concrete boundary, just stayed still. He had already caught her scent carried on the wind. The girl had arrived. Her classroom window was open, and from the second floor a burst of laughter drifted down. The source unclear, but within that sound, Rex could make out the distinct vibration of Sophie's voice. It was the same tone he had once heard from his teammates during breaks in the training yard of the northern camp. Short, full, unguarded laughter. Rex tilted his head, then sat. The wind stirred the tall grass. Sunlight bounced off his silver fur, encircling him in a faint glow like a ring of fire. A few students noticed his silhouette, pointing. A boy snapped a picture with his phone, then laughed. Then the sirens echoed from the end of the street. The control vehicle had arrived. Rex did not panic. He did not bolt, did not growl. He turned, stepping back quietly into the bush. But the wound on his left leg had not healed. With every step, blood seeped through the fur, dripping in small, bright drops onto the dry ground. The woman stepped down from the truck, snare pole in hand, eyes scanning. "Where is it?" she asked Mrs. Landon. The old woman pointed. "There, past the grass." The chase didn't last long, but it was enough to draw attention. Rex never attacked. He only ran, slipping through gaps in the fence, darting across the clay yard into a nearby alley. At one point, cornered against a fence post, he launched himself upward, clearing a trash bin with an instinctive leap, even as the wound tore deeper. One of the officers slipped, dropped the radio. The sharp clatter echoed down a street that had never known such noise. Up on the second floor, Sophie's classroom window was wide open. She saw it all. The big gray dog jumping over someone's flower bed, its back streaked with dust and blood, being chased by two adults as if it had done something wrong. For a moment, her heart thudded hard. She recognized that run, that limping left leg, and those ears folded back when scolded, just like the morning before, when it had stood beneath her porch, looking up, asking for nothing. Beneath the schoolyard, where concrete met the restless whispers of children, the rumors had already begun to spread like dry leaves catching wind. "There's a stray dog, gone rabid. It's stalking kids, I swear. This morning, I saw it circling the fence. What if it already attacked someone?" Words tossed back and forth, not out of malice, but fear sharpened by imagination, the kind that snowballs when no adult steps in to slow it down. That afternoon, Rex didn't return to the narrow alley behind Sophie's home. Instead, he lay curled in the hollow of an old tree near the abandoned bus stop, where sunlight never quite reached, and the faint, greasy smell of old fuel masked the trace of blood now drying across his fur. The wound on his hind leg had split wider, no longer bleeding but crusted into a dark patch that tugged at skin with every twitch of muscle, sending sharp pangs with each movement. Still, Rex made no sound. He didn't whimper, didn't shift. One ear remained perked, listening, always listening. Back at home, at that very moment, Caleb sat hunched before his laptop, reviewing the footage supplied by the school's security camera, the one the woman from animal control had sent him. The image was grainy, blurred by distance and low resolution, but it was clear enough to make out the silhouette of a gray coat and the red streak trailing down one back leg, and clear enough for Caleb to recognize what others wouldn't. The same shadow that had once sat silently beneath his porch light 3 nights ago, watching from the dark like a forgotten promise. He didn't mention any of this to Sophie, but later that evening, as Sophie quietly placed a new smiley face keychain on her windowsill, one almost identical to the one lost on the bridge, the living room lights were still on, casting soft reflections across the glass, and within that mirrored surface, the faint outline of her father could be seen, sitting alone in his chair, his gaze unfixed yet heavy, pointed somewhere deep beyond the window, toward the edge of the forest. And just as Sophie reached to draw her curtain closed, she paused, because she heard something, faint but unmistakable, the sound of light footsteps pressing through the grass in the backyard, steady and soft, like someone walking past without the intention of staying. She didn't call out, neither did Caleb. But both of them, one in silence by a window, the other still in the living room's half-shadow, felt the same tremor pass through the night. The following morning, the sky opened with a gentle drizzle. Not enough to soak, not enough to flood, just a steady veil of rain like heavy mist, enough to darken the pavement, to dampen the sleeves of a thin jacket, and to release the earthy perfume of wet bark, decaying leaves, and long-settled dust finally given a reason to rise. Sophie rode her bike to school, like she always did. She took the long route past the edge of the small market, crossed the vacant lot where a house had once been built and abandoned before it ever found a family. Her classmates had named that intersection Broken Brick Fork, not out of poetry, but from the piles of old red stone scattered like forgotten building blocks. No one accompanied her today. The rain had sent most of the children toward the bus shelters, their backpacks huddled like turtles under bright umbrellas. But Sophie still chose the bike. She'd told her father once. Riding makes my head feel quieter. Her tires rolled over muddy gravel, thin tracks forming behind her as the wheels cut gently through shallow puddles along the edge of the road. The air smelled of wet soil and rust. The sky remained overcast, but no longer felt heavy. A pale glow was beginning to bloom softly along the horizon, like a secret being whispered into light. As she reached the stretch of road that ran between the marketplace and the empty lot, a sound, small but precise, cut through the rain. The hiss of a car window sliding down. Parked close to the curb, hugging the right side of the road, sat a white van. No front license plate. The passenger side window was half lowered, and from within came the voice of a man, hoarse but trying to sound kind. "Hey there, did your dad's car break down? I can give you a lift to school." Sophie gripped her handlebars tighter. Her heart thudded against her ribs like it was trying to warn her before her brain could finish a thought. She didn't recognize the man. His face was narrow, jaw sharp, eyes sunken beneath the shadow of a dark cap pulled low across his forehead. His right hand rested on the steering wheel. The other held out a brightly colored lollipop. There was nothing strange about the words he said, but something in the way his eyes flicked downward to her legs, then swept over her backpack as though calculating weight and distance made something inside her stomach twist cold. She didn't answer. She began pedaling again, slowly at first, careful to keep moving, careful not to look back. "Hey, wait!" the man called again, louder now, urgency leaking through the cracks in his voice. "You'll catch a cold in this weather." And at the exact moment Sophie leaned forward to push faster, she heard it, the sound of tires shifting on damp gravel, a subtle forward nudge. The van was moving, not fast, but unmistakably following. To her left was nothing but weeds and tall grass, open land, but no escape. To her right stood a sagging wire fence belonging to an old electronics shop that had closed the year before. No alleyways, no doors, nowhere to cut through. Her breath caught, her chest tightened, she pushed harder. And just then, from the roadside thicket, sharp and sudden, a growl erupted, not a warning, not a snarl, but a sound like steel being dragged across steel, fierce and slicing, crashing straight into the ears of every living thing on that road. A gray blur shot out from the bushes. No hesitation, no warning bark, just one clean, arcing leap, straight toward the front of the van. Rex landed with force that shook the air, his forepaws dug into the pavement, body braced like a stone barrier between danger and the girl behind him. His entire frame stood rigid, fur on edge, ears pricked high. His gaze bore through the windshield, unwavering, locked onto the man behind the wheel. Teeth bared, not in threat, but in final refusal, like a gate refusing to yield. The man recoiled, flinching backward so quickly that his hand dropped the lollipop. For a heartbeat, he and the dog stared at each other. And in that one flash of eye contact, the man's bravado cracked. The calm drained from his face, replaced by something older, deeper, recognition. Like he had seen those eyes before, in a place he didn't dare revisit. The engine roared, the wheels spun. The van veered sharply toward the market road, splashing a long trail of muddy water in its wake, then vanished into the bend. Sophie hadn't moved. Her fingers clutched the handlebars so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. She watched the road long after the van was gone, then slowly let her gaze fall. To the space in front of her bike. To the dog. To Rex. He hadn't approached. He hadn't retreated. He simply stood there, between twin puddles reflecting the sky, his breath drifting in faint clouds of white mist. And in that fog of rain and danger now past, his eyes still glowed. Not with fire, but with the calm, unwavering light of a lantern at the end of a long corridor. Unflickering, unyielding, unforgotten. Sophie didn't know what to do. Her mind was still tangled in the flashing image of the van, the voice that called to her, the unfamiliar eyes that didn't blink, and then the growl, the leap, that blur of motion that came out of nowhere and collided with everything. But her heart was overwhelmed by something else entirely, a feeling that refused to take shape, a sensation like fear, but not the kind directed at the dog. She pedaled away, not looking back. But this time, it wasn't because she wanted to escape. No, this time it was because she wasn't sure what she'd see if she turned around. A threat or something else entirely. A follower or a protector. Rex watched her silhouette disappear into the pale curtain of mist. He didn't chase after her. But there, on the earth where his front paws had just landed, remained the deep marks of bloodied claws. And tangled in the matted fur on one leg, a small piece of torn paper clung. Its corner ripped, just enough to reveal a single faded line written in trembling strokes of black marker. Even if no one hears, go where you're meant to be, at the time you're meant to arrive. The words drifted through his mind like the echo of a memory that had long since wandered off course. A ghost of a phrase that had once floated down the halls of the training base, where mottos were painted in heavy black across brick walls beneath the insignia of Unit 7 K9. Rex couldn't grasp the full meaning of the sentence, not really, but the rhythm of it, the cadence of a command never spoken aloud, was still etched into the marrow of his bones. The sky above Ash Willow had grown heavier now, no longer that soft, milky veil suspended above low rooftops, but a solid darkening canvas that foretold an early arrival of the afternoon rain. The wind had begun to slither along the roadways, swirling crisp leaves around Rex's paws. The wound on his hind leg made each step more burdensome than the last, every movement tugging at the torn muscle that had never truly healed, not in the way it should have. But Rex didn't turn toward the forest. He didn't seek the shelter behind the crumbling wall in the alley behind town, where he had once curled up unseen. Instead, he began walking toward the main road, the one where the amber lights had just begun to flicker on above the street, where humans were most often found, and where he had always stayed farthest away. His steps no longer held strength, but they carried rhythm. Every 2 paces, a slight falter. Yet his eyes remained unblinking. His head stayed upright. Just like those days when he climbed over rubble at the training camp, where every charred log, every broken beam, had been a trial without applause. Near the corner, in front of a small pharmacy with a tilted wooden sign that read, Linden's Apothecary. Since 1972, Rex stopped. The scent in the air, medicinal herbs, dried lavender, the sterile sting of disinfectant, drifted out in quiet layers, like a call that needed no voice. He raised his head toward the glass door. The lights inside were still on. Someone was wiping down the medicine shelves. And then Rex collapsed. He didn't cry out. He didn't resist. It wasn't the fall of something that gave up, but the surrender of something long-enduring that had simply reached its edge. He lay on his side, eyes open, breath shallow, fur around his leg clotted into a dark, thick mess. The first to see him was a young woman, dressed in the soft white uniform of a pharmacy technician, her hair tied back neatly, one hand still holding a spray bottle. She opened the door, stepped outside, and her eyes fell upon the large dog lying motionless on the tiled sidewalk, its body streaked with dust. At first, hesitation, but then she saw the faint breath escaping his nose, forming a thin plume in the cooler air. She dropped to her knees. One cautious hand reached forward, fingers sliding beneath the fur at his neck, searching. A pulse, weak but there. Then she saw it, the faded collar hidden beneath the coat, the small metal tag, dulled by grime and nearly illegible. She lifted it carefully, exhaled once over the surface. A line of text appeared, blurred at the beginning, but the final part still visible, still intact. Rex, Unit 7K9. Her eyes widened. No more questions. No weighing of decisions. Her hand pulled out a phone, opened the contact list, scrolled to a number labeled Oak Ridge K9 Shelter Archive Line. She hit call. Her voice, when it came, was low and trembling. "There's a German Shepherd here. He's wearing an old collar. It says Unit 7K9. He's injured. I think he's one of the ones that got discharged back in 2019. There was silence on the other end, just for a moment. Then a deep male voice replied, "Can you confirm any distinctive scar or injury?" She leaned in closer, gently sliding her hand along the dog's left flank, parting the fur with care. There it was, a long scar, straight as a knife's cut, angled along the hip. "Yes, a long one. Very precise. Like from surgery." "Stay where you are. We're sending someone now." Rex didn't know who was touching him. He couldn't see the face, but he could feel the warmth of a palm, hear a voice free of fear, and smell something long forgotten, something old and clinical, like gauze and antiseptic, like the floors of a camp where he'd once lived and worked, where pain had a purpose and rest was never taken for granted. His body twitched as a blanket was gently draped over him. But he didn't resist. His eyes remained half open. And just before they closed for good, he caught a final image. On the young woman's wrist was a bracelet, stitched with the shape of a white wolf and a faded red seal, the insignia of the old rescue corps. The lights inside the apothecary dimmed as the door swung closed, and in that moment, outside, the rain began to fall. Not hard, not fast, just soft, steady drops striking the awning, each one a quiet note, like someone tapping on memory with the tip of their finger. Far down the road, at the edge of the intersection, a white vehicle slipped silently through the rain. The man's hand still gripped the steering wheel tightly, fingers tense as if molded into place, while the rearview mirror captured the slow, rhythmic blink of the traffic light overhead, its red hue pulsing faintly against the wet windshield in harmony with the falling rain. And in the fleeting second, as the van glided past the dimly lit pharmacy, the eyes behind that low-drawn cap didn't face the road ahead, but flicked sideways, to the place where a small light still shimmered, faint and persistent, like something left unfinished. Yet the vehicle didn't stop. The next morning, Ashwillow Elementary began like any other, filled with the clamor of young voices echoing through the halls, the shrill whistles from gym class bouncing off the walls, and the lingering scent of warm cocoa milk still hanging in the corridors from the early snack break. No one paid any attention to the west gate, the very spot where, just yesterday, a white van had nearly intercepted Sophie. No one, except one man. Nathan Cole, the school's camera technician, was the first to review the footage from that area. Not out of suspicion, but because one of the cameras overlooking the sports field had tilted slightly in last night's storm, and he needed to verify its angle before recalibrating. But when the footage began to play, a single unexpected frame stopped his hand. The white van came into view at the lower edge of the screen, descending slowly from the road above, inching toward the side gate. No turn signal, no pause at the crosswalk. It simply crept forward, silent and steady. Then, from the frame's edge, a shadow burst forth. Not blurred, not uncertain, but clear and fast. A German Shepherd, large, dark-furred, its form barreling forward with purpose, charged straight toward the van's front end. Nathan rewound the footage several seconds, then played it back in slow motion. And at the precise moment when the dog's paws struck the pavement, body braced before the vehicle, eyes locked onto the windshield like they could see through the glass and into the man behind it. The van jolted, then swerved, then accelerated. It vanished from the frame, leaving only a wash of dust and a splash of rainwater arcing across the camera's lens. The dog stayed a moment longer, motionless, then turned and disappeared in the opposite direction. Nathan didn't consider himself particularly fond of dogs, nor did he trust himself with reading subtle moments. But after thousands of hours spent watching surveillance footage, he'd learned to spot the things that didn't fit. He saved the video, named the file Gate Incident X092, then slipped the USB into his jacket pocket and headed to the principal's office. And as he walked the length of the hallway, the weight in his chest wasn't quite fear, nor was it urgency, but something solid and slow, like the steady knocking on a door no one ever expected to hear open again. Principal Meyer was not the type to jump to conclusions. He watched the footage in silence, one hand pressed lightly beneath his chin. Then, without a word, he picked up the landline and dialed a number he hadn't used in a long time, one belonging to the only man he knew would understand exactly what this video showed. Caleb Hale, I think you should come to the school. There's something you need to see. Caleb arrived in less than 30 minutes. He didn't waste time with greetings, just nodded once and stepped into the room. Meyer inserted the USB, opened the video, and skipped forward to the 30-second mark. And when the white van appeared, Caleb moved toward the screen. Slowly, eyes narrowing with each second. He saw Sophie. He saw the van. And then, he saw it. That shape, bursting from the left side of the screen, launching itself in front of the vehicle. He didn't need to zoom in. He didn't need to enhance the image. He recognized the movement, the slight dip of the rear leg every time it landed, the proud curve of the neck, lifted like it was challenging whatever came through the glass to meet its stare. "It's him," Caleb whispered, not with fear, but with the kind of breath that stretches just a second too long, because memory needs room to return. No one in the room said anything more. That afternoon, when Sophie came home, she found her father standing by the kitchen window, the place where the coffee pot usually sat, but which today was empty. Caleb wasn't holding any cup. He wasn't reading. He was just watching, gazing out toward the narrow path that led behind their yard, to the edge of the forest. Sophie paused in the doorway, then asked softly, "Are you looking for something?" Caleb turned, and his eyes, for once, seemed lighter, not less serious, but softened at the edges, as though carrying the weight of a realization rather than a worry. "I was just thinking, if that dog was here before, then maybe he didn't come by accident." Sophie didn't answer immediately. She placed her bag on the chair, poured herself a glass of water, then reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the sunflower keychain, the one she had once left on the windowsill, and which now was no longer there. She held it up to the light. A faint scratch traced the plastic surface, not deep, not clear whether it came from a claw or the road, but it was fresh. "I don't think he's gone far," Sophie said quietly. Caleb nodded. Then, from his pocket, he drew a printed still frame from the school's surveillance video, the frame where the dog stood, planted before the van. He placed it on the table. And beside it, a small metal tag, worn, faded, its edges dulled by time. But if you tilted it just right under the light, the words could still be read, "Rex, Unit 7K9. At that exact moment, across town, in the school's maintenance room, Nathan was tidying his desk when he stumbled upon another video file, footage from the Northfield's camera. The angle wasn't ideal. The branches interfered, shadows cut across the screen. But the timestamp told a different story. He pressed play. And in the first few seconds, an unexpected image appeared. A tall man in a thick coat and dark cap, standing close to the wire fence, staring inside. No one at the school recognized him, and more importantly, He wasn't with any student. The text message reached Caleb while he was steeping ginger tea in the kitchen. The sender was unknown. The message was short. No punctuation. 7K9 dog is safe at Oak Ridge. Deep wound. Heavy blood loss. Still alive. Caleb didn't reply. He set the phone aside, poured the tea into a chipped brown ceramic cup, then moved quietly toward the stairs. Upstairs, Sophie was sitting by the window, holding a soft fabric pouch in her lap. Inside it, she had carefully folded the small yellow blanket she used to take with her during nights away from home. At her grandmother's, during storms, or when homesickness made sleep hard to hold on to. The blanket was frayed now, the embroidery of a sunflower in one corner barely holding together. Its threads loosened like old fences weathered by too many summers. But she had never replaced it. Caleb didn't ask. He didn't try to stop her. He only said one thing when he saw her standing by the door, ready to leave. If you go, make sure he knows. Not everyone leaves without a word. The Oak Ridge Rescue Center sat tucked between soft hills, backed by a line of pine trees, and fronted by a winding stone road that curved like a letter C toward a small parking lot. The sky that day wasn't bright, but sunlight broke gently through the clouds, creating threads of gold that shimmered across the glass windows of the vet wing on the right. Sophie walked in, her heart steady but full. Her eyes scanned each room, clear glass panes showing dogs and cats in recovery, some asleep, some blinking slowly after sedation. The silence was so complete that the squeak of rubber soles against the floor echoed like a whispered heartbeat. She followed the directions of the red-haired receptionist with round glasses. Room 4. Inside, a large dog lay on its side, its back left leg wrapped in white gauze, an IV line trailing from its foreleg to a saline bag hanging above. His ash-gray coat still held a layer of dust, despite a recent cleaning. And around his neck, an old leather collar still clung, slightly askew, the engraving barely legible, worn by time, blood, and distance. Rex, Unit 7, K9. Sophie placed her hand gently against the glass. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes never left the slow rise and fall of Rex's chest, each breath measured as if counted by memory itself. Every moment he had appeared, every time he had stood back, every second beneath the rain, and the leap that changed everything. And on the other side of the glass, Rex lay still, unaware of the world beyond the beeping machines, but breathing, still breathing, as if waiting for the one voice that had never once called him a mistake. Sophie didn't know what to do. Her mind was still tangled in the flashing image of the van, the voice that called to her, the unfamiliar eyes that didn't blink, and then the growl, the leap, that blur of motion that came out of nowhere and collided with everything. But her heart was overwhelmed by something else entirely, a feeling that refused to take shape, a sensation like fear, but not the kind directed at the dog. She pedaled away, not looking back. But this time, it wasn't because she wanted to escape. No, this time it was because she wasn't sure what she'd see if she turned around. A threat or something else entirely. A follower or a protector. Rex watched her silhouette disappear into the pale curtain of mist. He didn't chase after her. But there, on the earth where his front paws had just landed, remained the deep marks of bloodied claws, and tangled in the matted fur on one leg, a small piece of torn paper clung, its corner ripped, just enough to reveal a single, faded line written in trembling strokes of black marker. Even if no one hears, go where you're meant to be, at the time you're meant to arrive. The words drifted through his mind like the echo of a memory that had long since wandered off course, a ghost of a phrase that had once floated down the halls of the training base, where mottos were painted in heavy black across brick walls beneath the insignia of Unit 7K9. Rex couldn't grasp the full meaning of the sentence. Not really. But the rhythm of it, the cadence of a command never spoken aloud, was still etched into the marrow of his bones. The sky above Ash Willow had grown heavier now, no longer that soft, milky veil suspended above low rooftops, but a solid, darkening canvas that foretold an early arrival of the afternoon rain. The wind had begun to slither along the roadways, swirling crisp leaves around Rex's paws. The wound on his hind leg made each step more burdensome than the last, every movement tugging at the torn muscle that had never truly healed. Not in the way it should have. But Rex didn't turn toward the forest. He didn't seek the shelter behind the crumbling wall in the alley behind town, where he had once curled up unseen. Instead, he began walking toward the main road, the one where the amber lights had just begun to flicker on above the street, where humans were most often found, and where he had always stayed farthest away. His steps no longer held strength, but they carried rhythm. Every 2 paces, a slight falter. Yet his eyes remained unblinking. His head stayed upright. Just like those days when he climbed over rubble at the training camp, where every charred log, every broken beam had been a trial without applause. Near the corner, in front of a small pharmacy with a tilted wooden sign that read, "Linden's Apothecary." Since 1972, Rex stopped. The scent in the air, medicinal herbs, dried lavender, the sterile sting of disinfectant, drifted out in quiet layers, like a call that needed no voice. He raised his head toward the glass door. The lights inside were still on. Someone was wiping down the medicine shelves. And then Rex collapsed. He didn't cry out. He didn't resist. It wasn't the fall of something that gave up, but the surrender of something long enduring that had simply reached its edge. He lay on his side, eyes open, breath shallow, fur around his leg clotted into a dark, thick mess. The first to see him was a young woman, dressed in the soft white uniform of a pharmacy technician, her hair tied back neatly, one hand still holding a spray bottle. She opened the door, stepped outside, and her eyes fell upon the large dog lying motionless on the tiled sidewalk, its body streaked with dust. At first, hesitation, but then she saw the faint breath escaping his nose, forming a thin plume in the cooler air. She dropped to her knees. One cautious hand reached forward, fingers sliding beneath the fur at his neck, searching. A pulse. Weak, but there. Then she saw it, the faded collar hidden beneath the coat, the small metal tag, dulled by grime and nearly illegible. She lifted it carefully, exhaled once over the surface. A line of text appeared, blurred at the beginning, but the final part still visible, still intact. Rex, Unit 7K9. Her eyes widened. No more questions, no weighing of decisions. Her hand pulled out a phone, opened the contact list, scrolled to a number labeled Oak Ridge K9 Shelter, Archive Line. She hit call. Her voice, when it came, was low and trembling. "There's a German Shepherd here. He's wearing an old collar. It says Unit 7K9. He's injured. I think he's one of the ones that got discharged back in 2019. There was silence on the other end, just for a moment. Then a deep male voice replied. "Can you confirm any distinctive scar or injury?" She leaned in closer, gently sliding her hand along the dog's left flank, parting the fur with care. There it was, a long scar, straight as a knife's cut, angled along the hip. Yes, a long one, very precise, like from surgery. "Stay where you are. We're sending someone now." Rex didn't know who was touching him. He couldn't see the face, but he could feel the warmth of a palm, hear a voice free of fear, and smell something long forgotten, something old and clinical, like gauze and antiseptic, like the floors of a camp where he'd once lived and worked, where pain had a purpose and rest was never taken for granted. His body twitched as a blanket was gently draped over him. But he didn't resist. His eyes remained half open. And just before they closed for good, he caught a final image. On the young woman's wrist was a bracelet, stitched with the shape of a white wolf and a faded red seal, the insignia of the old rescue corps. The lights inside the apothecary dimmed as the door swung closed. And in that moment, outside, the rain began to fall. Not hard, not fast, just soft, steady drops striking the awning, each one a quiet note, like someone tapping on memory with the tip of their finger. Far down the road, at the edge of the intersection, a white vehicle slipped silently through the rain. He hesitated, only for half a second. But in that brief flicker of time, his hand darted up to smear away the message scrawled across the foggy windshield, wiping hard and fast as if to erase not just words, but a shadow clinging too close. Yet the moisture returned just as quickly, spreading again like the blurred trace of something still chasing, something that needed no sound, no name, and certainly no permission to follow. At the Ash Willow Community Center, normally a quiet space used for PTA meetings or second-hand book fairs, every plastic chair was filled tonight. The blue seats had been pulled tightly into rows, with overflow chairs borrowed from the elementary school library lined up along the back wall. The air was thick with the smell of wet raincoats, damp shoes, and the old wooden floor that always seemed to release its musty breath when too many people gathered at once. At the far end of the room, a temporary projector screen had been hastily rigged to a laptop belonging to the school's safety coordinator, a tall, lean man with salt and pepper hair and the posture of someone who had once served and still remembered how. He scanned the crowd, waited for the hum of conversation to settle into hush, then pressed play. The footage began. Security camera footage from the school gate, grainy but stable, enough to capture the unmistakable shape of a white van slowing as it approached the west entrance, its movement predatory, quiet, like a hunter trying not to rustle the leaves. Sophie appeared next, small, careful, her backpack hugged close to her chest, steps steady but wary. And then it happened, so fast that every pair of eyes in the room seemed to freeze in sync. From the bushes flanking the school gate, a dark blur burst forth. No barking, no growling, no wreckage of trash bins or breaking of fences, just one clean, unstoppable leap directly into the van's path. The camera jolted from the impact. The front license plate popped loose, tumbling into the corner of the frame. The van screeched, spun, fled, its tires spitting water and dust behind it like a panic set on wheels. No one in the room spoke. The footage cut to a second clip, this time from outside the pharmacy that same afternoon. Rex lay on the sidewalk, his body low, blood spilling from his back leg into a thick, dark line that stretched like a signature of pain across the concrete. A young woman, an animal rescue worker, knelt beside him, pressing a towel against the wound with one hand and resting the other gently at his throat. Her lips moved, too soft for the mic to capture, but visible enough for everyone to see the one word she spoke. "Thank you." The first to stand was Mr. McLean, the grocer from the corner store, the very man who had once signed a petition to have the dangerous stray dog removed from the neighborhood. He raised a trembling hand and spoke with a hoarse voice. "I was afraid of him because I didn't know. But now I do." From the second row, Mrs. Landon, the woman who had called the police that day, rose to her feet, her eyes rimmed with wetness. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said quietly. "But if I could do it again, I'd go to Rex with a bowl of water and a dry towel." Applause followed. Not loud, not immediate, but soft and widening like the first drops of rain tapping a tin roof, forming small circles that reached quietly, steadily, outward. Caleb stood near the back, arms still folded, but his eyes weren't fixed on the screen. They were on the center aisle, where Sophie sat surrounded by grown-ups, her backpack cradled in her lap, her spine straight, legs pressed neatly together, like a child reminding herself to be strong, even though this wasn't a classroom, and no teacher had asked her to try. Then the mayor stepped forward. Mr. Richards, longtime town leader, holding the microphone with both hands. "I've lived in Ashwillow for 35 years, he said, and I've never seen a town meeting where so many people cried. We judged a creature, simply because it didn't have a voice to defend itself. But now, it has spoken, not in words, but in action." He paused, turning to point toward the paused frame on the screen. The one where Rex stood alone, body squared before a van, eyes fixed without fear. "No one ordered Rex to block that car. No one summoned him. He doesn't belong to anyone, but he chose to be there. So maybe the question we need to ask isn't, where did he come from? But—" His voice dropped, but his words landed hard. "Are we worthy of him staying?" No one answered aloud, but the answer echoed in the room, in the nodding heads, in the clasped hands of strangers, in the slow rise of a girl who stepped quietly toward the front of the room, a small sunflower keychain trembling in her fingers, her voice shaking as she spoke. "I don't know if Rex would want to stay with me, but if I had a choice, I'd want to take him home." The applause that followed was louder this time, steadier, and not a single person left their seat when the meeting officially ended. They stayed, each one as if holding space for something fragile and precious that needed to be kept whole just a little longer. That night, at Oak Ridge Rescue Center, the recovery room window remained slightly ajar, letting in the faint hush of wind down the tiled hallway. The night nurse passed by and noticed the light still on. She peeked in and smiled. Sophie had fallen asleep beside Rex, her head resting on the edge of his bed, her right hand loosely curled around a folded scrap of paper scrawled in soft pencil. "Tomorrow, if you say yes, I'll take you home. No missions, just living." The wind slipped gently through the corridor, brushing the corners of the room with a whisper. And far away, on a street already tucked into sleep, one lone figure paused beneath a street lamp, pulling from inside his coat a long, flat object wrapped in oil paper. In the palm of his hand, a dog tag shimmered faintly beneath the pale glow, etched with the words, 7K9, training files restricted. No one in Ashwillow saw that figure, and even fewer knew that the little piece of metal he held had once belonged to a life that hadn't barked in years, and hadn't belonged anywhere, not truly, for longer than anyone had ever bothered to ask. That morning, Rex had no knowledge of the quiet arrival, of the eyes that had begun to watch from afar, nor of the wheels that had already turned toward him from directions unknown. He was simply standing on the worn stone step before a small house whose porch roof was softened by a thin layer of green moss, while Sophie, her olive coat frayed at the cuffs, too short at the wrists now, gently fastened a new leash around his neck, a gray one, with stitched orange threading. The warmest hue she had ever chosen since second grade, back when her mother was still alive, and her father wasn't yet too busy to take her on morning walks. The first light of the day had just begun slipping through the slats of the wooden fence, brushing softly against Sophie's hair and catching in the strands like sunlight trapped in early fog, turning her brown waves into something almost cloud-like. She leaned slightly forward, her hand resting on Rex's back. Not a command, not a signal, but a simple, quiet gesture, enough to tell him that this journey was not beginning because someone said so, but because both of them agreed to begin it. The old wooden bridge stood just a block away, once a boundary of fear, and now a point of departure into something unnamed, something new. It used to creak beneath every step, its weary groans like the breath of forgotten timber. But after the last storm, the townspeople had come together to repair it. The planks were freshly laid, unweathered by time, still bearing the grain of raw wood and the scent of dampness. Yet between them, a few old boards remained, worn and dark, still holding the square imprints of claws, the exact place where Rex had once slipped. Sophie didn't tighten the leash. She let it hang loose, slack like the rhythm of a walk, not between owner and pet, not between rescuer and rescued, but simply between two beings who had found a quiet tether in one another. Rex walked slowly, each step leaving a soft, deliberate sound on the wooden planks beneath him. His paws made no noise of urgency, no sound meant to announce anything, only a rhythm, a gentle cadence built from trust and shaped into the quiet music of peace. Beneath the bridge, the thin current of water whispered as it passed over moss-covered stones, reflecting sunlight into flickering patches that danced across the underside of the beams. A dragonfly, its wings translucent as pressed rice paper, landed momentarily on the leash, fluttered once in the morning breeze, then lifted away, leaving behind a stillness so pure it felt like breath held by the world itself. At the bridge's midpoint, Sophie stopped. And Rex stopped too. No pull, no prompt. Ahead stood an old bench, one of those simple wooden kinds, now cleaned and set upright by someone unknown. On its surface lay a single violet wildflower, pressed flat against the grain, not wilted, not crushed, just leaning ever so slightly in the wind. Perhaps left by someone, perhaps a sign, but to Sophie it felt like a message, something unspoken and tender, the kind of thing that says someone had once waited here. She didn't sit. She stood beside it, one hand resting on Rex's neck, her eyes gazing toward the edge of old briarwood forest, the place where they had first found one another. A breeze passed gently through, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and pine needles. Overhead, a flock of sparrows curved through the air in an arcing formation, before scattering into smaller clusters, like brushstrokes of dark ink swept across a sky that had not yet decided whether it would rain. Sophie tilted her head toward Rex. He didn't look back, but his tail moved, just slightly, enough to let her know he was listening. And when she leaned down and whispered near his ear, her voice lower than the wind, Rex closed his eyes, as though every word had meaning, and none of them needed explaining. At the far end of the bridge, where the forest line met the last house of the town, an old mailbox tilted in the wind, battered and rusted. At its base, something caught the light, a glint of metal exposed by the rain from the night before. Sophie stepped closer, Rex following slowly. She knelt and picked it up, a collar tag, brass, worn and tarnished, its name nearly erased, but on the reverse, one line was still legible. 7K9, Rex. Her fingers traced the lettering, her lips pressed together. Her gaze dimmed just slightly, caught in some distant place. Rex stood beside her, unmoving, unspeaking, and then, with the same calm that had defined him since the day she met him, he bent down and touched his nose softly to her wrist. From the distance, the sounds of town began to stir. The first hum of engines, the clatter of opening shutters, the unmistakable signal that morning had arrived. But here, on the bridge, the stillness remained, preserved like a pause in time, untouched. Sophie slipped the tag into her coat pocket and began walking again. Rex followed, his head slightly bowed, ears tilting back, as though listening for something ahead, something just beyond hearing. And at that very moment, at the far end of the street, where sunlight kissed the edges of the trees, a black SUV slowly appeared, its tires rolling over an old pothole without a sound. Inside, a man sat silently behind the wheel, his charcoal coat folded neatly, a thin file opened across his lap. In the top corner of the folder, the words were printed in faded ink. Unit 7K9. MIA List, Rex. He didn't smile, he didn't frown, but behind the dark lenses of his sunglasses, his eyes followed the two figures, one tall, one small, as they disappeared beyond the curve of the bridge, leaving behind only the soft cadence of footsteps on wood, the quiet answer to a call that had been waiting for years. That morning, the skies over Ashwillow wore the pale, cloudy white of a season in between, a day suspended between warmth and chill. The wind was light, but enough to lift the first yellow leaf from the porch roof, where Sophie sat by the window, knees curled up on the chair, her head resting gently against a curtain that moved with each breath of air. On the desk beside her, a pencil had been sharpened until the graphite tip glistened dark and pointed. She didn't use ink pens, not because she didn't have any, but because ink could not be undone. And what she was about to write, she wasn't sure she would have the courage to keep. The paper was folded once, the top edge slightly torn where her fingernail had paused too long in hesitation. But when the pencil finally met the page, the letters appeared small, even, steady, as if each line had been waiting there all along, simply asking to be named. Mom, if you were still here, you'd probably ask why I'm writing a letter I won't send. But I think some things are only meant to be written and tucked beneath someone's pillow, never needing an answer. Sophie looked up, out the window, where Rex lay under the tree, his body leaner now but his eyes still deep, still filled with that same quiet fire she had first seen in the woods. His front legs were bandaged, and the old fleece blanket she had left behind at the shelter was now tucked beneath his head. Not because it was warm, but because someone had given it, and he had chosen to keep it. She leaned forward again, pencil in hand, and continued to write, each stroke softer now, slower, like the words weren't coming from her mind, but from some quiet place that had only found a voice tonight. Rex isn't like any dog I've ever known. He doesn't bark, he doesn't destroy things, and he doesn't wag his tail when I call. But every time I stumble, he stops. Every time I turn away, thinking I might give up, he never pulls me back. But he never leaves either. I don't know how he knows, but it feels like he knows who Mom was. And somehow, he knows who I am, even though I've never said a word. The final line faded beneath the dulling tip of the pencil. Sophie set it down, her fingers brushing lightly over the smudged letters. There were no tears, but her breathing slowed, as if each sentence had carried more weight than paper could hold. I used to be afraid of Rex, afraid because I didn't understand, afraid because I thought he came for something I couldn't repay, but now I know. Some people, and some dogs, come only to keep a promise. She stopped, still and silent for a long time, then carefully folded the letter in half, each crease pressed as if sealing something sacred, something more than just a note left behind. Outside, the sky had shifted into a warmer hue, a muted orange threading gold into the porch light, stretching a long, soft line across the wooden floor as if guiding her steps. Sophie walked quietly toward Rex. He still lay there, eyes half closed, his nose twitching gently now and then as the wind carried scents of earth and old leaves drifting through the open air. Sophie knelt, her hand resting lightly on the corner of his pillow. Then, gently, as if not to disturb even the air, she slid the folded paper beneath the edge of his blanket, tucking it near the place where his breath rose and fell in slow, steady waves. She didn't speak. She didn't wait for a sign. But as she rose and stepped backward, Rex opened his eyes, not turning, not growling, only watching, just as a soft breeze slipped through, lifting the corner of the blanket enough for the edge of the letter to peek out. Sophie turned to leave, but just before stepping inside, she stooped to place a small stone over that corner of paper, as if to keep it from blowing away, as if afraid the unsaid might vanish too soon. That night, the house glowed gently in the warm hush of soft yellow light. On Sophie's desk, her mother's old clock ticked its usual rhythm. Steady, quiet, as always. But this time, Sophie left the window cracked open, and kept it that way through the entire night. Out on the porch, Rex remained where he had been, lying beneath the eaves, the wind brushing past the roof tiles and rustling through the apple tree just beyond the back fence. And under the blanket, still untouched, still smooth, the letter, written in fading pencil, stayed where she left it. No creases, no lines disturbed. And somewhere beyond the town's quiet edge, just where the orange street lamps kissed the fringe of the forest, a car pulled over. The headlights remained off. Inside, a man sat watching ash willow from afar, just far enough to remain unseen. In his hands, a notebook lay open. On the first page, a photograph clipped from an old case file, a German shepherd standing upright beside a handler at the entrance to Camp 7K9. Beneath the photo, 3 lines of red ink, written in rushed, angry strokes. Rex, Unit 7, Canine Emotional Tracking Capacity, High Behavior Control, Unstable. Morning in Ashwillow came slower than usual. Along the main street, the windows were trimmed with white and brown ribbons, modest and unassuming. Tied to the lamppost outside the town library was a bouquet of wildflowers, not arranged with flair, but wrapped in twine, gathered from the edge of the forest, placed there by hands that knew quiet gestures meant the most. No one called it a ceremony. There were no drums, no anthems, no banners stretched across the road. But as the first light of day spilled onto the steps of the town hall, people began to gather in small groups, nodding, greeting one another not with fanfare, but with eyes that had already agreed on one thing. Today belonged to Rex. Sophie stood at the edge of the stone steps, dressed in a simple gray dress, her hair tied up, holding a folded card in her hand. Beside her, Caleb remained still, the quiet strength in his posture unchanged. But his eyes? They lingered not on the crowd, not on the camera, but on the very end of the front row, where Rex sat. Calm, unleashed, unmuzzled. Only a new collar circled his neck, plain leather with a tag that read, Rex Ash Willow. A camera from the local station had been set up on a tripod, its lens fixed on the brick-paved square and the small makeshift podium at its center. A young woman adjusted the microphone, ran a quick sound check, then stepped back into the background. The first to speak was the elementary school principal, her voice gentle, at times stumbling, but no one minded. She recounted the town meeting, the footage, the moment the van swerved and Rex placed himself between Sophie and the path of harm. No one interrupted. No one rushed her. Every eye turned to Rex, not to applaud, but simply to witness, the way people do when someone returns from a journey too long, too hard, too deeply felt. Next came the school technician, the first to notice the footage. He spoke only a few words, then quietly returned to his seat. After him, the woman who ran the bakery stepped forward, the same woman who once shooed Rex from her storefront. I didn't know, she said softly. I thought he was just another stray. But he never did anything wrong. He just sat there every Wednesday afternoon, right when Sophie walked by on her way home. And then Sophie was called to the front. No one had asked her to. No one told her to step forward. But when the girl walked out into the middle of the square, something in the air above Ashwillow seemed to still, as if even the chirping of the brown birds perched on branches nearby had been caught mid-note and gently held there, paused in reverence. Sophie stood beside Rex, her hand resting lightly upon the thick, warm fur at the back of his neck. Not gripping, not commanding, just a quiet, steady presence offered to another. From the pocket of her coat, she pulled out a small piece of paper. Not long, only a few lines written in her neat, deliberate hand. Once, I asked my dad what it meant to be a hero. He said, "It's doing the right thing, even when no one sees." But today, I think, sometimes, a hero doesn't have to do anything at all. Just be there quietly when you need them. No one said anything after that. But there were eyes brimming with tears, hands that found each other and held tighter, and one elderly woman in the very last row who pressed her palm to her chest, as though trying to hold back something that had waited too long to be spoken. There were no more speeches, no ribbon cuttings, no balloons released into the air. Instead, one by one, family by family, they stepped forward, knelt, and laid their hands gently upon Rex's head, whispering short, private words that the wind chose not to carry away. The children gathered close, not in chaos, not with noise, but in quiet unity, as if their nearness alone might help keep the warmth in that thickening, graying coat a little longer. Rex didn't leave. He didn't shift. He simply remained, as still and unmoving as a statue sculpted from breath and memory, his eyes always turning back to Sophie each time she glanced over her shoulder. And each time, that look, wordless and unwavering, gave her an answer that could never have come from anyone else. The sun climbed higher, casting clean light down across Sophie's hair, catching and reflecting against the lenses of Caleb's glasses, where he stood at a diagonal, his hand lightly gripping the edge of his coat, his gaze distant, as though searching for something that had once slipped through his fingers and now had returned in a form no one could have foreseen. By noon, the small broadcast truck from the regional news station rolled out of Ash Willow, carrying with it a segment not yet fully edited, but already more whole, more human than any feature they had ever aired. That evening, when the video was posted, its cover image showed Sophie seated beside Rex, the soft amber glow of the late afternoon sun pouring through the wooden slats of the bridge, striking the metal tag on his chest until it gleamed like something sacred. The caption beneath it was simple: "No bark, no command, just presence at the right time." And somewhere farther off, just a few miles beyond the limits of Ash Willow, the man in the sunglasses had not yet driven away. He was still sitting inside his vehicle, laptop open, a grainy, older video playing on screen, footage from years ago, showing Rex as a young recruit entering the 7K9 training facility for the very first time, with an assessment scrawled across the form: "Exceeds reactive threshold, highly attuned to nonverbal signals." But instead of closing the file, instead of turning the screen dark, the man scrolled downward, past the archives, past the evaluations, until he reached a red button at the bottom of the interface, one that had not been touched in over 3 years. "Reactivate old tracking. Status. Target at large." His finger hovered over the button, but did not press it. Not out of hesitation, but because out there, just faintly visible in the satellite feed overlaying the corner of his screen, the outline of the old bridge appeared through a veil of digital blur, and there, on that bridge, was a girl resting her hand against the chest of a dog. And the dog, though it never turned its head, somehow seemed to know, with a clarity that could not be taught nor trained, that somewhere, someone was preparing to take back something that it had just reclaimed, using everything it had left in its heart to do. The Johnsons' world shattered when they lost their daughter, Lucy. Amid their grief, Kite, a loyal German shepherd, became their guiding light. He wasn't just a dog. He was their protector, offering silent comfort and unconditional love. Kite's presence gave them strength, reminding them that even in the darkest times, love endures. But his role wasn't just to stay by their side. He helped uncover a painful truth that the family needed to face. Kite's loyalty led them to healing, showing that sometimes love, sacrificial and unwavering, is what truly helps us find peace. The Johnson family's farm lay quietly on the outskirts of Pine Brook, where sunlight gently filtered through the green fields and over distant hills. But lately, the air here had grown heavy, almost suffocating, as if an invisible sorrow had settled over everything. Sarah Johnson, 15 years old, was no longer herself after the death of her younger sister, Lucy. Lucy, Sarah's little sister, had sacrificed herself to protect Sarah from kidnappers. At just 10 years old, she had thrown herself in front of Sarah when the attackers rushed toward them. During the chaos, a speeding truck on a quiet road hit Lucy, throwing her from the pavement, and then sped off into the night. A long trail of blood marked the road where only Sarah's silent tears remained, the only sound in the world. Sarah had witnessed it all. The memory of that day, the image of Lucy, still haunted Sarah. She could still see the look in her sister's eyes, full of love, full of determination. Lucy wasn't afraid. She understood that she had to sacrifice herself to save Sarah. A quiet, painful sacrifice. Since Lucy's death, Sarah had not spoken. She fell into a deep, unending silence, not uttering a word, though her family tried to help, sending her to therapists, attending counseling sessions. Nothing worked. Sarah just stared off into the distance, her eyes empty, as if she were trapped in a world where sound and emotion no longer existed. Each day, Sarah sat silently by the window, gazing out at the empty spot where the truck had hit Lucy. Sometimes she drifted into the rolling green fields beyond, but there was no smile. Everything had stopped in Sarah's heart. She couldn't imagine how to continue living in a world without Lucy, her closest friend, the one who truly understood her. Then, one morning, when the weak sunlight filtered through the living room window, something strange happened. A faint sound from outside the yard, soft yet enough to pull Sarah out of her thoughts. She turned to see a German shepherd standing silently by the fence, its eyes bright beneath the morning sun. It was the first time Sarah had ever seen this dog. It wasn't like any other dog she had ever seen around here. Its fur was unkempt, stained, but its eyes shone with a strange, steady calmness. But what was even more surprising was what the dog carried. As Sarah approached, the dog slowly walked forward and laid down a dirty wallet and a piece of red fabric. The fabric had a familiar pattern and color. It was exactly like the dress Lucy had worn that day. A wave of horror surged through Sarah's chest, but she couldn't speak. She just stood there, staring at the items the dog had brought. Kite, as Sarah later learned his name, wasn't just a strange dog. He was an odd companion, a sign of a connection Sarah couldn't explain at the time. In Kite's eyes, there was a depth of understanding and love that Sarah could feel, even if she couldn't put it into words. The wallet and red fabric that Kite brought were symbols of a connection full of pain, but also hope. Even though Sarah couldn't speak, an unfamiliar warmth began to fill her heart. Sarah's heart had been locked away for so long, a door she couldn't find the key to. Every time she saw Kite standing silently by the window, his eyes shone like a light in the darkness, yet Sarah couldn't open herself up. Guilt consumed her. She couldn't stop thinking about how she couldn't protect Lucy, her only sister. Every night, the memory of Lucy throwing herself in front of her to shield her from the kidnappers, only to be hit by that truck, haunted her. The helplessness, the feeling of being powerless, wrapped around Sarah like a chain she couldn't escape. She blamed herself, thinking that if she hadn't been so scared, if she had acted faster, maybe Lucy would still be here. Tears would fall, but Sarah couldn't speak. Her silence, like the emptiness inside her, couldn't find the words to describe the pain. The world seemed to turn its back on her, and her voice was taken the day Lucy died. But Kite, the German shepherd, seemed to understand the despair Sarah carried. When the dog came close, his eyes didn't pity her. They showed empathy and resolve. He didn't force Sarah to open up, didn't pressure her to say anything. He simply stood there, silently, patiently, like he was waiting for a moment when Sarah could reach out on her own. Even though the dog didn't do much beyond appearing and looking at Sarah with those understanding eyes, every quiet gesture from Kite seemed to help her feel a piece of the love she had lost. Slowly, Sarah started to see that Kite wasn't an intrusion. He was a wordless friend, a companion who would never leave her. Still, Sarah couldn't open up right away. The first time Kite came close, she stepped back, avoiding him as if his closeness were a nightmare she didn't want to face. "Why you?" Sarah thought to herself, the tension rising in her chest. "You're not Lucy, you can't replace her." But Kite didn't leave. The next morning he returned, placing the wallet and the fabric in front of Sarah's door, a quiet reminder. It was as if there was a message yet to be said, an unfinished connection. Kite had become an irreplaceable part of Sarah's healing journey. Instead of walking away like Sarah wished, Kite stood patiently, silently by the window, always ready. One day, as Sarah looked at the wallet and fabric, memories of Lucy flooded back. She remembered the moments before Lucy sacrificed herself, how her sister had courageously stood between Sarah and the kidnappers. Lucy had sacrificed herself for her. Sarah couldn't keep living in the shadows of guilt any longer. She could feel it, a strange yet undeniable clarity. She had asked herself countless times whether Lucy could forgive her, whether she could find herself again after everything that had happened. Every night, she clung to an old photo of Lucy, imagining her sister and feeling the heavy ache in her heart, like a weight that couldn't be erased. Although Sarah still couldn't find the words, the quiet moments Kite brought into her life began to slowly open a door to the emotions she had kept locked away for so long. Kite wasn't a replacement for Lucy, but his presence soothed the loneliness that Sarah had always battled. With every moment Kite stood by her, his eyes full of patience and love, Sarah felt a little bit of light slip into her heart. Though she couldn't speak, Kite didn't ask her to do anything at all. Sarah's emotions were a whirlwind, tangled and complex. She wasn't ready to face the truth of Lucy's death, but Kite's presence made her feel like she didn't have to face it alone. She couldn't speak, but Kite didn't demand anything. He just lay beside her, silent, simple, like a warm blanket on a cold winter day. Day by day, Kite became a wordless friend, understanding and patient. Sarah couldn't tell her story, but through the gentle gaze of Kite, she slowly began to feel an unspoken forgiveness, an unconditional acceptance. It was as though Kite was telling her that it was okay, that no mistake was too big to forgive, and love could still exist, even when everything had changed. Sarah felt that in the quiet moments between them. They didn't need to speak. The connection between them, though strange, was growing. Kite wasn't rushing her. He wasn't forcing her to confront her pain. This miraculous feeling only needed time, and with each passing day, Kite's presence helped Sarah realize that she didn't have to stay forever in the shadow of guilt. She didn't have to do anything to deserve love and protection. Kite had chosen to stay by her side. It was his loyalty and patience that gave Sarah a way out of the emotional numbness she had hidden for so long. She knew she needed time, and that there was no need to hurry. Kite would be there, beside her, helping her find herself, step by step. Lucy's death was still an open wound in Sarah's heart, but with Kite's help, She began to believe that one day she would face that pain without feeling guilty. The German Shepherd would be her silent companion through it all, helping her face each challenge, each haunting memory, and eventually guiding her toward the peace she hadn't felt in so long. Sarah continued to live in her silence. She couldn't speak, couldn't cry. She could only sit in that dark room, quietly, as if she were trying to hide from everything. Each morning, Sarah woke up to find herself surrounded by deep loneliness, with the shadows of the past still lingering around her. Even though the Johnson family had tried everything to help her, no one truly understood the depth of the pain Sarah was carrying. Bob and Martha, Sarah's parents, watched their daughter like a ghost. They didn't know what else to do. They had tried everything they knew, taking Sarah to therapists, enrolling her in special therapy sessions, but nothing worked. She couldn't accept any help. She remained silent, retreating deeper into her own shell. Every time they tried to reach her, Sarah would just remain quiet, her eyes distant, as though looking through them, unable to feel anything. Martha tried to get closer, but Sarah just pushed her away. The guilt and hopelessness were so overwhelming that Sarah couldn't face the people who loved her. "Mom, I don't want to talk," was all Sarah could say when she started to speak. But it wasn't real words. It was a rejection, a weary, painful refusal to engage. ChatGPT said. One day, when Martha called Sarah downstairs for lunch, Sarah just sat on the stairs, staring blankly out the window. She had no energy to do anything, no will to live. Martha sat beside her daughter, wrapping her arms around her. But Sarah just stayed still, her body cold and lifeless in her mother's embrace. An indescribable pain filled the room, as if something huge stood between them, separating them in that moment. Kite, the German Shepherd, was always by Sarah's side, though in a quiet, unobtrusive way. Even though Sarah could feel the dog's presence, she couldn't accept it. Her feelings toward Kite were conflicted. On one hand, she was grateful that Kite was always there, never leaving her. But on the other, she felt guilty. Lucy sacrificed herself for me, Sarah thought. Why am I still here when Lucy couldn't be? Kite was a painful reminder of the loss, of the guilt Sarah carried within her. Even though Sarah couldn't accept Kite, the dog didn't leave. Every morning, Kite would lie near Sarah, his calm eyes patiently watching her every move. Occasionally, Sarah would feel a warm wave from the dog, but she quickly pushed that feeling away. The guilt inside her was too strong, making it impossible for her to accept comfort from anyone, even Kite. This German Shepherd, with his understanding eyes and boundless patience, never gave up. Days passed, and Kite stayed quietly by Sarah's side, asking for nothing, simply being there. He lay beside her on the bed, followed her footsteps when she went to the kitchen, or simply stood nearby as she gazed out the window. Kite was always there, without words of encouragement, just a silent but powerful presence. Each morning, Sarah still felt a deep emptiness inside her. She couldn't reach for the past, couldn't face the truth about Lucy's death. Everything felt blurry, with no explanation, just the darkness hanging over her. But when Sarah saw Kite lying beside her, a gentle warmth would briefly pass through her. Slowly, Sarah began to realize, though she couldn't speak it, Kite was here for a reason. Did the dog want her to find her voice again? Did Kite understand that the pain Sarah carried was too heavy for her to speak? With every moment, Kite continued to show unwavering patience. There were times Sarah looked at the dog, her eyes emotionless, but Kite's gaze seemed to carry something, like he was telling her, "It's going to be okay." However, these feelings were fleeting because Sarah still couldn't let go of the crushing guilt she felt. Some nights, when Sarah cried silently in the dark, Kite was still there, lying quietly beside her bed. When Sarah awoke, tears silently streaming down her face, Kite would simply stretch his long neck, resting his head on the bed, as if waiting for a signal from her. But Sarah still couldn't find the words, couldn't understand how the guilt had her so tightly bound. Though she still couldn't speak, the moments when Sarah felt Kite near her brought a gentle sense of peace, an unspoken empathy. She began to feel Kite's presence more softly. The dog didn't push her, didn't ask her why she was this way. He just quietly stood by, ready to help. But everything hadn't changed yet. Sarah still couldn't escape the nightmares, the images of Lucy protecting her from the kidnappers and the sudden death of her sister. Even though Kite was there, but Sarah couldn't untangle the knot in her mind. She still wasn't ready to face the past, the pain too deep to speak. Yet Sarah began to have gentler moments when Kite was near. In those times, a part of her felt the comfort, the warmth that Kite brought. Even though she still couldn't speak, still couldn't fully open her heart, those moments were the first steps in Sarah's journey to find herself again. She began to realize that Kite could help her step out of the darkness, a slow, steady movement, but full of hope. Kite was always there, wordless, never pushing, just being present. His eyes silently followed every step Sarah took, like a quiet companion, always by her side when she needed him most. There were mornings when Sarah walked down the stairs, and she noticed Kite's eyes were always fixed on her every move, never leaving her. The dog remained patient, still there, even though Sarah wasn't ready to face the deep emotions inside. Those eyes, full of understanding and calm, made Sarah feel strangely safe. She no longer felt the desperate loneliness she had before. Sarah didn't speak, but her heart had begun to change. The silent days were no longer entirely empty. Though she still couldn't find her voice, she started to feel something from Kite. It wasn't just his presence, it was something much deeper. Unconditional care. A love that didn't need words. One evening, while the family was having dinner, Sarah felt a wave of comfort wash over her as she looked at Kite. The dog was lying on the floor, his eyes fixed on her with incredible patience. In that moment, Sarah didn't feel abandoned or alone anymore. The feeling washed over her like a warm wave, soothing her, carrying her to a safe place she hadn't been able to find before. She might not have spoken, but she began to realize that Kite was the only friend who could help her through this tragedy. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah lay in bed, the dim light shining through the window. Kite lay quietly under the bed, close to her feet. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. In that moment, she felt a strange connection to Kite, a safety she hadn't felt since Lucy's death. Though she couldn't put it into words, Kite's presence filled the empty space in Sarah's heart. Sarah couldn't speak, but she could feel. She could feel the love, the care. She could feel a dog who asked for nothing, who never pushed, just simply being there beside her whenever she needed. The dog didn't just save her from nightmares. He saved her heart from loneliness and guilt. Sarah began to understand that, even though she couldn't protect Lucy, Kite had come to help her step out of the darkness. Those peaceful moments, though not grand, were deeply meaningful for Sarah. She began to understand that sometimes not all painful emotions need to be spoken. Some things only need to be felt. And Kite had taught Sarah that. When Sarah looked into Kite's gentle eyes, she no longer felt afraid. She no longer felt as though she were standing alone in the darkness. Kite was a small light, but strong enough to guide her out, one slow step at a time, full of hope. He wasn't just a rescue dog, he was a wordless companion, always by Sarah's side, watching over her and patiently waiting until she was ready to accept the affection and support he offered. At first, Sarah was confused, unsure how to handle Kite's presence. She always felt like there was an invisible barrier between her and the dog, the weight of guilt clouding her thoughts. Although Kite never disturbed her, never pressured her to interact, his quiet, reliable presence slowly began to win Sarah's heart. One morning, as the first rays of dawn filled the room, Sarah woke from a dream haunted by memories of Lucy. She looked out the window, where the gentle light touched the empty land outside. The room glowed with warm sunlight, but Sarah still felt the darkness of painful memories inside her. When she turned around, Kite was lying silently at the foot of the bed, his eyes alert and gentle, still focused on her. He didn't move. He just lay there, as if protecting her. Suddenly, Sarah felt a warm wave wash over her. It wasn't a forceful feeling, nor was it a demand to accept love. It was a gentle sense of safety, like a friend who didn't need words but was always there. For the first time in months, Sarah didn't feel alone. She realized Kite wasn't just a rescue dog. He was a loyal, wordless friend, ready to listen, to understand all the emotions she was going through. Every time Sarah felt the tension in her body, every time the memory of Lucy's death froze her in place, Kite would quietly come closer, a reminder that she didn't have to face it all alone. Kite's patience was like a steady hand that held Sarah's heart. The dog didn't ask anything of her, didn't force Sarah to open up. His presence was calm, unyielding. In the early days, Sarah couldn't say a word to Kite, but the peace in his eyes and his silent presence gradually soothed the chaotic emotions within her. One day, while Sarah sat on the couch by the window, Kite lay at her feet, his patient eyes still directed toward her, gentle yet protective. Sarah suddenly felt the safety Kite provided. She relaxed her shoulders, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, the weight of guilt didn't press down on her. Kite didn't need to say anything. He was just there. And that was enough for Sarah to realize she no longer had to face this pain alone. Though the guilt and worry still surrounded her, Sarah began to understand that Kite's presence was a source of strength. She couldn't fully escape the painful memories, but little by little, she began to open her heart and feel that she wasn't alone on this journey. Sarah stood by the window, looking out at the empty space in front of the house, the place where she and Lucy had once played together. Each morning, the soft sunlight filtered through the tall trees, creating gentle golden streaks. Though the sound of her sister's laughter was no longer there, the image of it remained vivid in Sarah's mind. Kite lay quietly beside her, his eyes gazing out as though sharing the moment with Sarah. No sound, no rush of movement. Kite remained patient, sitting by her side, and his silent presence gently soothed the anxiety in Sarah's heart. He didn't need to do anything more than simply be there. Suddenly, Sarah sat close to Kite, her hand gently resting on the dog's back. The warmth from Kite's body spread through her hand, making the worries inside her slowly fade away. In that moment, there were no words needed, only a simple connection through a touch. Sarah began to feel the safety Kite brought. Kite wasn't rushing, wasn't pushing Sarah to confront anything. The dog was just there, steady and calm, like a shield of protection without promises. For Sarah, this was a protection without words. There was no pressure, only a steady presence and silent patience. That feeling was like a small flame flickering in the dark, not too bright, but enough to chase away the shadows, enough to warm Sarah's cold heart. As Sarah sat by the window, her hand still resting on Kite's back, a sense of peace began to fill the space inside her. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying with it the soft sounds of the morning, making the atmosphere feel tranquil and serene. In that moment, Sarah no longer felt alone in her grief. She didn't feel pulled under by the painful memories anymore. Fear and guilt were slowly replaced by a fragile trust in the future. Though the memories of Lucy's death were still vivid in Sarah's mind, she no longer felt bound by the pain. With Kite's patience and unconditional love, she began to step out of the shadow of the past. Every time Sarah recalled those painful moments, Kite was there beside her, comforting her, as if reminding her that nothing was insurmountable, as long as she had the strength to face it. Suddenly, Sarah felt that she had found a bit of peace in her heart. As long as Kite was by her side, she knew she could find the calm and strength to move forward. Sarah no longer felt the overwhelming loneliness, no longer a victim of the past. Slowly but steadily, she began to open up, allowing positive emotions and genuine feelings to replace the fear that had clung to her for so long. Kite appeared beside her again, his loyal eyes looking at her as if to say, "Everything will be okay, you're not alone." Kite's silent presence had gradually begun to heal Sarah's wounds, in a way that was wordless but strangely effective. Though she couldn't speak, Sarah could feel the unconditional love Kite had for her. The dog was always patient, never abandoning her, no matter how cold or distant Sarah became. Whenever Sarah felt anxious, whenever the painful memories of Lucy's death came rushing back, Kite was always there, beside her, comforting her with a gentle wag of his tail, with his warm eyes. No words were needed, no grand gestures. Just his presence was enough. Over time, Sarah's feelings grew. She no longer saw life as a burden. Instead, she began to understand that it was a journey she could walk alongside Kite. There was a time when she thought she couldn't continue, that the pain of losing Lucy would forever torment her soul. But now, with Kite's support, she began to realize that life still held valuable things, and that she herself was meant to continue living. Not just for herself, but also for Lucy, her sister who had sacrificed for her. Sarah began to realize that living wasn't about running from the past, but about facing it. She couldn't change the past, couldn't bring Lucy back, but she could honor Lucy's sacrifice by living a meaningful life. Each step Sarah took was no longer weighed down by guilt, but was part of a journey to honor the sister who had protected her until her very last breath. The guilt gradually faded away. Instead, Sarah felt pride for her sister. Lucy wasn't just a smart, gentle sister. She was a hero who had done everything to protect Sarah. Sarah knew that, even though she couldn't protect Lucy, she could continue to live, carrying forward the values her sister had taught her: courage, unconditional love, and the willingness to sacrifice for those you love. With Kite's unconditional love, Sarah found the strength to rise up and begin opening her heart to the world once again. She no longer saw herself as a victim of the past, but as someone fighting to live, to love, and to uncover the truth behind Lucy's death. With Kite by her side, Sarah was no longer afraid. She had begun to face her pain and find strength within herself. That was the first step of her awakening. Sarah had found her voice again, and that was the first sign of a significant change. She no longer felt imprisoned by the past. With Kite beside her, she no longer felt alone. The painful memories no longer held sole dominion over her. Kite lay beside her, his bright eyes always carefully watching Sarah's every movement, as though he understood everything she was going through. Suddenly, Sarah stopped. Her gaze shifted to the garden outside, the place where she and Lucy had shared so many happy memories. In that moment, the memory of a summer afternoon flooded back with powerful clarity. Sarah remembered a day when the two sisters were walking home from school. They had just crossed an empty street when a black car suddenly sped toward them with terrifying speed. Before Sarah could react, the group of criminals appeared, jumping out of the car and springing into action. Sarah couldn't process what was happening, but she felt the danger instantly. She saw Lucy, in a moment of sharp clarity and determination, rush toward her. "Sarah, get out of the way!" Lucy yelled, pushing her to the side. Without thinking, Sarah was shoved off the road. She didn't understand why Lucy had done that, but when she saw her sister hit by the car, Sarah felt as though her entire world was crumbling. Lucy's body flew from the impact, and then everything went silent. The world around her fell into a dark void. The memory of Lucy's protection came rushing back clearly to Sarah. She remembered every detail as if it had just happened yesterday. It was Lucy, her sister, who had given her life to save Sarah from an unforeseen death. The guilt Sarah had carried for so long began to lift. Instead, she felt an immense pride for her sister's actions. Lucy's death wasn't a random accident. It was a courageous, loving sacrifice. As Sarah stood still, her heart full of emotion, Kite sat beside her. The dog did nothing, just quietly sat by her side. There were no words, but Kite's presence was an incredible comfort. Whenever the painful memories returned, Kite would move closer, gently licking Sarah's hand as if to soothe her. Sarah realized that no matter how painful the past, with Kite by her side, she no longer felt alone. A sense of relief slowly spread through Sarah. No more pain, no more guilt weighing her down. She began to realize that she could move forward, overcome everything to honor Lucy, and finally understand that her sister's sacrifice wasn't something to regret. Sarah even felt happiness when thinking of Lucy's protection and how her sister had helped her escape the criminals. She knew that Lucy would always live in her heart, and she would not let her sister's sacrifice be forgotten. In that moment, Sarah felt a deep connection with Kite. The dog wasn't just a companion through the hard times. He was a strong source of encouragement, helping her step out of the shadow of the past. Kite didn't just help Sarah remember the painful memories. He helped her find the strength and courage to continue living. The self-blame she had carried for so long slowly faded, replaced by pride for her sister's heroic actions. Kite looked up at Sarah, his eyes seeming to understand that now was the time for her to continue moving forward. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the warmth from the dog beside her. No matter how many painful memories lingered, she knew she no longer had to face them alone. She turned back to the house, where the Johnson family was beginning to sift through old documents, forgotten information from past investigations. These papers were all related to the kidnapping and what had happened to Lucy before she passed. Each document was a missing piece of a story the family had yet to understand, a puzzle not yet completed, but one that would help them understand what had really happened. In the quiet house, Bob and Martha were carefully reading the documents they had found in the small attic. Sarah saw the concern in their eyes. They were trying to reconnect the dots in the case, but Sarah knew there were still many questions left unanswered. A heavy weight pressed on her shoulders as the memories of that day rushed back into her mind, like violent waves crashing into her. "Sarah, can you come here?" Bob called. Sarah stood up and slowly walked over to them. The papers in her parents' hands contained information she had never seen before. A series of documents, including police reports, witness statements, and crucial pieces about the criminal network that Lucy had unknowingly gotten caught up in. Sarah took a deep breath and looked down at the pages with tense eyes. She couldn't help but feel a shiver inside. Each new piece of information made the memories of that terrifying afternoon rise up again. She remembered the black car speeding toward them, and the criminals pulling Lucy into a confrontation. Lucy had tried to protect her, had done everything to keep her safe. Each memory felt like an old wound slowly reopening. But Sarah knew she couldn't go back. She had to move forward. As Sarah wrestled with these thoughts and memories, Kite remained by her side, quietly standing near her. The German Shepherd did nothing, but his steady, strong presence made Sarah feel safer. Every time she recalled the painful memories, every time she felt like she couldn't continue, Kite would come closer, comforting her and silently watching her, as if reminding her that she was not alone. Little by little, Sarah began to open up, the clues her family had found in the old documents becoming clearer. The criminals Lucy had faced weren't just strangers she'd encountered on her way home. Their connection to a larger criminal organization was greater than Sarah had realized. And gradually she began to understand that Lucy wasn't just a victim. She was a brave warrior who had sacrificed her life to protect her family. Each time Sarah revisited the memories, Kite was always there, patient and never leaving her side. Whether she felt fear or anxiety, Kite remained, a wordless, loyal friend who helped her stay calm in the face of pain. Thanks to Kite's companionship, Sarah could not only recover her memories, but also gradually uncover the larger secrets behind Lucy's death and the battle her sister had faced. The documents the Johnson family had discovered were only the tip of the iceberg. Sarah recalled the moment Lucy had thrown herself in front of the speeding car to protect her. These memories, like old wounds, came rushing back, causing sharp pain, but slowly, a significant change began to take place within her heart. As the images of Lucy's sacrifice returned to Sarah's mind, she realized that her sister's love for her wasn't just about protection, but unconditional love. What Lucy had done wasn't just a heroic act to save her. It was a brave and determined decision. Lucy had sacrificed herself not for her own sake, but for Sarah's, to make sure she would survive and continue to live. Sarah sat quietly, her eyes gazing out the window, but her mind drifted into a distant memory. She saw Lucy standing in front of her, pushing her out of the way while she herself fell. That feeling of protection was like an invisible shield, saving Sarah from death, but unable to save Lucy. "Lucy," Sarah whispered unconsciously, her voice choked with emotion. Kite lay beside her, offering no movement, just quietly watching Sarah. The warmth from his presence reached her, making Sarah feel no longer alone. Gently, she stroked Kite's head, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't know what I would have done without you," Sarah said, her voice still tinged with a hint of sorrow, though it wasn't the same guilt or fear she'd felt before. "You did everything for me, but I couldn't do anything." Kite looked up at her, his eyes filled with patience and understanding. Without a word, his presence was a reassurance, a comfort, telling Sarah she didn't have to face this pain alone. "Lucy chose to sacrifice herself for me," Sarah continued, "but this time, the pain wasn't as overwhelming. She loved me so much. She gave her life, and I—" She paused, her breath becoming steadier. "I'm not the one at fault. She did it willingly, out of love and the need to protect me." Sarah lowered her head, and slowly the guilt melted away, replaced by a deep sense of pride in Lucy's actions. The feeling of Lucy's sacrifice made Sarah view herself differently. She wasn't a victim anymore, but someone who would carry on with life, living to protect those she loved and honoring the one who had sacrificed for her. The self-blame was no longer the focal point of her life. Instead, Sarah felt strength growing inside her, and pride for her sister. She looked into Kite's eyes, not only seeking comfort, but also finding encouragement from her loyal companion. "Thank you, Kite," Sarah said softly, gently patting his head. "I'll be stronger. For Lucy. For me." This feeling, though it couldn't instantly erase all the pain, made Sarah realize that Lucy had done it out of love and boundless loyalty. It was a heroic act, not to bring suffering to Sarah, but to protect the sister she loved. Sarah no longer felt that she was the one at fault. The image of Lucy in her final moments was that of a strong, loving sister, not a helpless victim. "She did everything for me," Sarah whispered again, but this time she didn't feel guilt. "I won't disappoint you." Kite, lying beside her, looked calmly into the space around them, patient, as if knowing that today was the day Sarah would gradually find herself again. Sarah could feel Kite's presence, the sense of safety in having him there, as if nothing could hurt her anymore. After months of silence today, her heart began to ease, and the fears that once consumed her no longer held sway. She slowly let out a deep breath, as if pushing the heavy emotions out of her body. The guilt that Sarah had always carried no longer dominated her mind. She remembered her final moment with Lucy, the image of her sister standing in front of her, protecting her from the speeding car. Lucy's sacrifice was now etched deeply in Sarah's mind, and for the first time, she felt pride in her sister's actions. Sarah no longer saw herself as the cause of Lucy's death. She realized that her sister's sacrifice was an act of unconditional love. Gently, Sarah stroked Kite's head, feeling the warmth from him. "I won't disappoint you," Sarah whispered, no longer speaking out of guilt, but as a promise to herself, to Lucy. The memories of Lucy's death slowly became clearer, but Sarah no longer felt tortured by them. She knew that Lucy's sacrifice was a crucial part of her life, the motivation for her to continue living and rise from the darkness. The fear that once weighed so heavily on her was now lighter, and Sarah felt she could continue living and seek the truth behind Lucy's death. Kite still sat quietly beside Sarah, his loving eyes always watching her. His silence wasn't neglect, but a steadfast support. Like an unconditional friend, Kite didn't need to say anything. With his mere presence, he helped Sarah navigate the turbulent waves in her heart, guiding her from the fear of the past to the hope of the future. As Sarah's father, Bob Thompson, worked on fixing the tractor outside, Sarah stood by the house, Kite lying beside her, his eyes following her every step. Her father, a strong man with years of experience working outdoors, had never easily recognized that his daughter was gradually opening up again. Previously, all he saw was her pain and silence. But today, something had shifted in her. Sarah's eyes met her father's, no longer filled with sorrow, but with something lighter, perhaps even hope. "Dad," Sarah began, her voice shaky but firm, "Lucy protected me." Bob, still busy working on the tractor, flinched slightly and turned to look at Sarah, his face full of confusion. "What did you say?" Sarah swallowed hard, finding it difficult to speak, but she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. She threw herself to push me out of the way, Dad. She sacrificed herself to protect me." Bob paused, wrench still in his hand, but his gaze fixed on Sarah, stunned and pained. "What are you saying? Lucy did what?" Sarah looked down at the ground, then back at her father. I saw it clearly. The car was coming, and she pushed me aside, but she—" Her voice faltered, but she didn't stop. "She did everything for me. She protected me from those criminals, Dad." A long silence followed. Bob stared at his daughter, his eyes lighting up with the truth Sarah had just revealed. A flood of guilt and sadness washed over him, but then he looked deeply into Sarah's eyes, and a sense of understanding slowly replaced the pain. "You don't have to blame yourself, Sarah," Bob spoke gently but firmly. "Lucy did everything for you. She loved you, and you have no fault in this." Sarah looked into her father's eyes, a warmth and relief filling her heart. She no longer felt guilty. "Dad, I'm going to keep going," Sarah said, her voice now stronger than ever. "I'll live to honor her." Bob looked at Sarah, his hands paused, dropping the wrench to the ground. "And I'll always be here, with you." He didn't say anything more, just walked over to Sarah and placed his hand on her shoulder. She knew from now on, Lucy would no longer be just a painful memory, but a driving force to live with strength and honor the sacrifice her sister made. Bob slowly moved closer to Sarah, his gaze full of concern, but also an immense pride. He had seen his daughter begin to open up after months of sorrow. "Sarah?" Bob's voice was warm and full of care. "I know you've been through so much, but I won't let you face this alone. I'll do everything I can to find out the truth about Lucy's death." Sarah turned to look at her father, her eyes brighter now, though still a little tired. "Dad, thank you," Sarah said, her voice still soft but clearer than ever. "I can't keep living in the past. I have to keep going. To honor her." Bob stepped closer to Sarah, his strong hands resting on her shoulders. "You're so strong, Sarah. Lucy would be so proud of you, and so am I. I'll help you find the truth. You won't have to face this alone." Sarah nodded, a warmth swelling in her chest. Though the memory of Lucy's sacrifice remained vivid in her heart, she no longer felt guilty. Instead, she felt immense pride for her sister's actions and a determination to live on. The weight of guilt that had haunted her for so long was no longer the force that drove her. It wasn't completely gone, but it no longer controlled her life. Sarah realized that, no matter how painful the past, she still had a chance to change, to move forward with the strength and courage her sister had passed on to her. Sarah began to feel a sense of freedom within herself, being able to face the past without being trapped by the pain and guilt anymore. Peace slowly began to emerge in every moment, and Sarah knew she no longer had to face everything alone. Kite was always by her side, and his wordless support helped her find strength in herself again. Sarah knew that life wasn't always easy, but she was ready to face any challenge. Her sister had sacrificed herself to protect her, and Sarah decided she wouldn't let Lucy's death become a burden, but rather the driving force to keep moving forward. She would live not only for herself, but for Lucy, ensuring that her sister's sacrifice wasn't in vain. In Sarah's heart, the pride she felt for her sister was the strongest force helping her push through any difficulty. She was no longer the fragile child of the past. Now, she was someone who knew how to love herself, protect what was important, and was determined to uncover the truth about Lucy's death. Bob, even in his silence, had always been Sarah's greatest supporter. Along with Kite, he could feel that Sarah was rediscovering her strength and trust in the future. He would never give up, and he wouldn't let the family suffer any more pain. Sarah no longer felt fear when thinking about the future. She had begun her new journey, a journey to find peace and strength to move forward. The guilt had slowly faded, replaced with pride and a stronger determination than ever. As the family explored the old documents, a key clue emerged, revealing secrets about David Roberts, the missing soldier they had never known. David Roberts was a name that worried the Johnson family when they saw his photo in a document they had just discovered. David, a soldier who had served in the army, had been missing for a long time. Initially, the family didn't think David had any connection to Lucy's death, but as they continued digging for information, everything started to become clearer. Kite had guided the Johnson family on this journey, helping them piece together events they hadn't fully understood before. One day, while Bob was rummaging through old files in a forgotten room in the barn, he found a box containing military documents about David Roberts, along with some clues about suspicious activities he had been involved in before he went missing. These documents pointed to a large criminal organization, and it was clear that David Roberts had been caught up in it, something no one in the Johnson family had known. Sarah, standing beside her parents, read the documents carefully, each page unfolding a story she had never known. The anxiety built up inside her, but this time it wasn't fear. It was a burning desire to uncover the truth. "Maybe this is why Lucy was caught up in all these dangers," Sarah whispered, looking up at Kite as if the dog understood her concerns. Kite gently nudged Sarah, as if to comfort her. Every time Sarah looked into Kite's eyes, she felt the reassurance, the warm presence of her loyal dog. The Johnson family began to piece together the story. The documents revealed that David wasn't just a missing soldier. He had been involved with an international criminal network, dealing in illegal weapons trade. This explained why Lucy had been pulled into danger. Sarah began to understand that Lucy's death wasn't just a random accident, as she had once believed. "Lucy was attacked because she uncovered things we never could have imagined," Bob said quietly, as if coming to terms with the painful truth they were facing. "David and Lucy had to face dangers we can't even begin to comprehend." Each clue, each discovery, brought the Johnson family closer to the truth. But with every revelation, they also felt an overwhelming sense of anxiety and fear. They realized that this investigation wasn't just about uncovering the truth behind Lucy's death. It was revealing a much larger conspiracy, a vast criminal network far beyond what they had ever imagined. The criminals Lucy had encountered weren't just random figures. They were part of a dangerous organization that could threaten their very lives. These findings not only changed the way the Johnson family viewed the case, but also heightened their sense of unease. They were no longer simply dealing with Lucy's death. They were now up against an entire criminal syndicate, one much more dangerous than they had ever expected. The connection between David Roberts and the criminals that the family had never known about was slowly coming to light, and this only made them feel more threatened than ever. Kite, the loyal German shepherd, once again became the wordless companion to the family. With every step of the investigation, Kite was always there, comforting them and guiding them through the difficult moments. Kite's eyes always seemed to see into Sarah's heart when she felt anxious, and his presence became an invaluable source of solace. Each clue the family discovered brought them closer to the truth. One day, while reviewing the documents in the family library, Bob discovered an old letter, long forgotten. This document was related to David Roberts' investigation before he went missing. The details in the letter revealed that David wasn't just a soldier. He was deeply involved, with close ties to international criminals. As Bob read, he could sense the gravity of the situation. This document not only addressed David's connections with criminal groups, but also contained critical information about illegal arms deals David might have been involved in. "This must be why Lucy was in danger," Bob said, his voice growing heavier as he read the last lines of the letter. David Roberts, whether he wanted to or not, got caught up in a large criminal organization. Kite looked up at Sarah, his eyes seemingly understanding that now was the moment for Sarah to keep moving forward. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the warmth from the dog beside her. Despite the many painful memories, she knew she no longer had to face it all alone. With Kite by her side, she could continue her journey, not only to uncover the truth behind Lucy's death, but also to live a life that Lucy had sacrificed for her to have. The Johnson family continued to dig deeper into David Roberts' past. They uncovered more old documents and records about dangerous deals that David might have been involved in, many of which were linked to illegal arms trading, an activity that put him squarely in the sights of a major criminal organization. "It's hard to believe that David could be involved in all of this," Martha said, her voice trembling as she finished reading a report on the hidden transactions. "Lucy didn't know about any of this, right?" "She couldn't have," Bob replied. "She couldn't have known what David was involved in, but we have to face the truth. And this truth is what led to Lucy's death. Every time the family dug deeper into David's past, Kite was there beside them, helping them find and piece together the fragments of the story. The dog didn't need to say a word, but with his mere presence, Kite had become a strong support for the family through this difficult journey. However, despite the family gradually understanding what David had done and how he was connected to the criminal organization, they still didn't have the full picture. They had only uncovered a portion of the truth, and many connections were still unclear. With every step forward in the investigation, the Johnson family felt the tension and the looming threat grow stronger. "We have to keep going," Sarah said, her hand resting on Kite's head as if seeking comfort in each gesture of the dog. "We have to find out the truth. No matter what, we can't stop." With Kite's help, the Johnson family began to realize that this investigation wasn't just about uncovering the truth behind Lucy's death. The pain still weighed heavily on Bob and Martha, as they realized that finding the truth wasn't just solving a case. It was a way to heal the deep wounds in their hearts. The conversation between Bob and Martha continued, as they now faced the biggest question. Could they solve all the secrets behind Lucy's death and protect their family from the dangers lurking in the past? Bob, placing the stack of documents on the table, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't think I can do this, Martha. Every clue we find leads to another road full of new shadows. Now we're not just dealing with Lucy's death, but with a massive criminal organization. I can't do it all alone. I can't lose anyone else, not again." Martha, sitting beside him, gently patting Bob's shoulder, offering a small smile. "We're not doing this alone, Bob. You know the important thing is that we fight for Sarah, not just for Lucy, but for the future of our family. If we give up, Lucy won't find peace, and we'll never find peace in our hearts either." Bob, looking up, his eyes filled with worry but also determination. "I know, but if we get to the end of this road, then what? That organization might have connections with very powerful people. We won't be able to handle them. Can I protect Sarah, Martha?" Martha, her voice firm, repeating words she had said before. "If we don't uncover the truth, if we don't fight, then who will? We can't let fear control us anymore. We will protect Sarah. We will protect our family. Yes, this criminal organization is dangerous, but with Kite by our side and the strength of this family, we can face any challenge. We need to keep pushing forward. We can't stop." Bob, looking into Martha's eyes, feeling her strength, he took a deep breath. "I understand now. This isn't just about justice for Lucy. It's for our family. We have to be stronger. We will keep going. I will never let fear stop us again. Sarah deserves peace." Martha, smiling proudly, she hugged Bob. "Then we'll go together. The whole family will uncover the truth. Lucy wants us to do this, Bob, and we can't let anyone in this family live in fear or injustice." Bob, nodding, his eyes shining with determination. "Thank you, Martha. I will do everything to protect you and Sarah. We'll get through this, for the family." From that moment on, Bob and Martha no longer felt alone in this fight. Kite's presence and the strong love between the couple had created an endless source of strength. Bob and Martha realized that, beyond seeking justice for Lucy, they also had to protect their family from the threats of the past. This investigation wasn't just about answering unanswered questions. It was also about healing the deep emotional wounds they had carried. Bob and Martha no longer saw themselves as isolated fighters in a hopeless battle. They knew they had Kite by their side. The family was united, standing together to fight for something greater, justice and the protection of their loved ones. Now, when facing new clues, the Johnson family no longer felt fear. They knew they were getting closer to the truth and realized that every decision they made would have a profound impact on their family's future. After months of searching, it was no longer just about solving Lucy's death. It was a fight against a criminal organization that had encroached too far into their lives. Kite, with his bravery and loyalty, had never left the Johnson family's side. The dog had become an essential part of their fight, always ready to protect them. The discoveries about the crimes related to David Roberts had led them to a more dangerous situation than ever before. The family sat around the table in the living room, the dim light casting shadows on their faces. On the table were documents, old photos, and clues that Kite had helped them gather. Bob and Martha looked at each other, sensing the tension in the air. "Bob," his voice dropping. "There's no turning back now? Everything we do from here is to protect Sarah, to protect this family?" Martha, looking at the documents, sighing. "I know, but every time I think about these people, I feel scared. They're not ordinary criminals. If we don't take them down now, we'll never have peace." Bob, gripping his wife's hand. "Not now, Martha. If we don't act, we'll never have peace. Lucy's death and David Roberts' involvement, this is our fight. We can't fear anymore." Kite, lying quietly beside them, seemed to sense the tension in the room. The dog lifted his head, looking at Bob and Martha, his eyes bright and sharp, as though preparing for the battle ahead. The tension was palpable as the family prepared for the confrontation. Kite stood quietly by their side, his presence a silent strength, a constant reassurance that they were not alone in this fight. Bob and Martha led the way, Sarah following behind, her eyes still betraying her fear. But she no longer wanted to run. The family stepped outside, weapons in hand, ready for the battle that would define their future. From a distant open field, a black car pulled to a stop. The criminals the Johnsons had been chasing had arrived. Their henchmen, still bearing the marks of past battles, stepped out of the car, their postures aggressive, their faces hardened. One of them, the leader, stepped forward and spoke in a cold, menacing tone. "Leader, what are you looking for? You don't belong here. Turn back now or we'll make you regret it." Bob, stepping forward, his voice calm yet firm. "We're not afraid of you. It's time for all of you to pay. We'll stop when you bring justice for Lucy and David." The criminal sensed the seriousness in the Johnson family's words. A showdown, relentless and unforgiving, was about to unfold. They drew their weapons, and before anyone could react, a fierce gunfight erupted. Kite leaped into the fray, ready to protect the family at any cost. The dog charged at the criminals, positioning himself between Sarah and any potential danger. In just a few seconds, the Johnsons used every skill they had to fight back against their attackers, determined not to let them escape justice. Sarah, screaming in panic as one of the criminals lunged at her. "Kite!" Without hesitation, Kite sprang forward, tackling the criminal to the ground, throwing him aside and shielding Sarah with all his might. Sarah could only look into Kite's eyes, feeling the strength, the protection he offered. The sound of gunfire filled the air, but Sarah no longer felt paralyzed by fear. With Kite by her side, she felt an overwhelming sense of safety. The fight raged on, and the Johnsons fought fiercely. With Kite's help, the criminals were subdued and taken into custody. The remaining criminals fled, and the Johnsons stood there panting, but with victory in their eyes. They had succeeded in confronting those who had killed Lucy and caused so much pain for their family. But more importantly, they had found peace, even amidst the chaos of the battle. Everything had happened so fast and so violently, but amidst all the chaos, Sarah felt a strange sense of security with Kite by her side. Despite the dire circumstances, she no longer felt the same fear as before. Instead, it was the peace Kite brought with him that she felt. The criminals, now using heavier weapons, pushed the Johnson family into a corner, turning the confrontation even more intense. Bob and Martha stood firm, returning fire to protect their daughter, but the pressure from the criminals was overwhelming. Sarah crouched behind a car, her eyes fixed on the scene, her heart racing with each shot fired. She could feel the tension in every breath she took, but she held her ground. She knew that no matter what, she couldn't give up. At that moment, one of the criminals lunged at Sarah, trying to grab her. Kite, sensing the danger, reacted instantly. Without warning, the dog charged toward the criminal, landing a powerful blow that sent him sprawling to the ground. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, but also in awe as she felt a surge of confidence. Kite had arrived just in time, not letting Sarah face the threat alone. Sarah, screaming as she sees Kite protect her. "Kite, thank you!" Kite didn't stop, continuing to keep the criminal under control with unwavering resolve. The large dog, fearless and strong, seemed to understand that he wasn't just fighting an enemy, he was protecting this family. At the same time, Bob and Martha kept fighting alongside Kite, facing off with the remaining criminals. The family had become one, fighting relentlessly for justice and for their survival. The leader of the group, standing from afar, glared at them, growling through clenched teeth. "You think you can defeat us? You'll pay for this." But Bob, with a determined look in his eyes, responded, "No one can defeat a family like ours. We will protect our daughter until our last breath." The gunfire raged on, each shot carefully calculated, but still fraught with danger. Sarah couldn't stand still in this moment. She turned back to see Kite guarding her, and in that instant, she felt the strength of loyalty. Kite wasn't just a protective dog. He was an irreplaceable part of this family, the truest friend Sarah had. In the end, another criminal was subdued by the Johnson family. The remaining criminals, realizing the strength of the family, began to retreat, disappearing into the shadows, too afraid to face them again. Kite returned to Sarah's side, standing tall like a silent hero. The criminals were defeated. Bob, panting, speaking to Martha. "We did it. It's finally over." Martha squeezed Bob's hand, her eyes filled with tears, but also pride. "We didn't just protect Sarah, we protected Lucy." Looking back, the Johnson family had overcome the greatest challenge of their lives. They had faced death, dangers they couldn't have predicted. But now, after everything, they had succeeded. The criminals were subdued, and their family was still together. Thanks to Kite, they had weathered this storm. The dog wasn't just a protector. He was a symbol of sacrifice, loyalty, and strength. After the battle ended, the family stood there, breathing heavily, but their hearts full of faith and peace. Bob felt Martha's warm hand in his, a strong connection between them, between those who had overcome the trial together. The physical and emotional wounds, though still present, had receded for now, but their hearts were no longer weighed down by fear because they knew they had done the right thing, fighting for justice and for their family. Bob looked at the criminals, now subdued, unable to fight back, and he felt a wave of relief spread through him. "Bob," softly, looking at Martha, "we did it, my love. Lucy would be proud of us." Martha, nodding, a small smile briefly crossing her face, though her eyes were still wet with tears. "And Sarah, she saw it all. We did the right thing." A light breeze blew through, ruffling their hair, but there was no longer a sense of worry or panic. The sky had cleared after the storm. They had protected Sarah, and in doing so, had safeguarded the most precious things in their lives. But the family couldn't help but think of Lucy. Even though she was no longer with them, the Johnson family knew that Sarah's sister had sacrificed herself for them. It was an unforgettable act. Lucy had fought to protect Sarah, and now they had to live on to honor that sacrifice. Bob tightened his grip on Martha's hand, realizing something important. Only by standing strong together could they overcome any challenge. Sarah, in a soft but determined voice, looking at Kite. "I won't disappoint you, Kite." Kite looked up at Sarah with sincere eyes, his silent presence providing all the encouragement she needed. Sarah felt the unconditional love Kite gave her. She no longer felt alone on this journey. Although they had faced a great challenge, there were still bright stars guiding her ahead. The guilt that once dominated her life no longer held power over her. Instead, she found a new trust, a peace within her soul. The battle had ended, but the Johnson family knew there were still many paths ahead. Sarah had found peace in her heart, and now, together, they would move forward, honoring Lucy and protecting their family. From now on, they would no longer shy away from challenges, for they had Kite, loyal and never abandoning them. Bob, turning to Sarah, "We'll never let you suffer again. You'll always have us. You'll never be alone again." Kite still sat beside Sarah, his eyes full of love. Sarah felt a sense of peace, not from words, but from Kite's patient presence. Once again, she knew that with Kite by her side, she could face any challenge, free from fear and guilt. Kite was unwavering, but within the Johnson family, there were still unanswered questions. The secrets were beginning to reveal themselves, and now they had to face the truth behind Lucy's death and David Roberts' disappearance. As Sarah gradually found her peace, Bob and Martha continued to piece together the remaining clues about the criminal group responsible for the tragedy. The family began investigating the people behind the case. But it wasn't an easy road. The documents and clues Kite had helped uncover were opening the truth, but they also brought the family face to face with dangers they hadn't imagined. One evening, as the sunlight began to fade, the Johnson family sat around the table in the living room, a stack of documents in front of them. Kite lay quietly near the window, always watching their every move. Bob, flipping through an old document. "Here it is. David Roberts, a missing soldier noted in the records of an international criminal organization. It seems he was involved in a larger criminal network than we thought." Martha, looking at the documents, skeptical. "What does this have to do with Lucy's death? Why was she dragged into this?" Bob, pausing, looking at Martha. "It's definitely connected. If David was part of this network, it's possible Lucy stumbled upon something and became a target." Kite stood up and moved closer to them, as if understanding that the family was finally uncovering the truth they had avoided for so long. A deep sigh escaped Martha as she began to realize that everything wasn't just an accident. Martha, placing her hand on her forehead. "We can't change the past, Bob, but at least we can help Lucy rest in peace." Bob, gently taking Martha's hand. "You're right. We need to keep going, not just for Lucy, but for Sarah. She won't find peace if we don't bring these secrets to light." The investigation began to reveal intricate connections. Through the documents they had collected, the Johnson family discovered that Lucy might have accidentally uncovered an arms trafficking network involving dangerous criminals both local and international. This information shed light on the connection between David Roberts and the criminal group the family was now facing. Martha, holding up an old report. "David Roberts, he was part of an arms trafficking organization, but how could Lucy have known about this?" Bob, looking at Martha, his eyes tense. "Maybe Lucy stumbled onto it when she was trying to help someone, or when she got caught up in something she couldn't avoid." The connections between the criminals slowly started to become clear. David Roberts, the missing soldier, wasn't just someone caught up in crime. He might have played a significant role in guarding dangerous secrets. The remaining pieces of this large puzzle began to fall into place as the Johnson family uncovered that this criminal group was tied to an international arms trade organization. Bob, holding a paper with several marked sections. "This is the organization we're facing. But there's still one big question. Who's behind all of this? Who's pulling the strings in the shadows?" Martha, turning to Bob, her eyes filled with tears. "It's not what we thought, is it, Bob? We're not just searching for answers to Lucy's death. We're uncovering everything that's happened to our lives, about David, and about all the things that have been hidden." Bob looked at Martha in silence, feeling the complexity of their situation. They weren't just facing loss, they were confronting dangers they hadn't anticipated. What they knew about the criminal group was still just the tip of the iceberg. Kite stood by their side, his calm eyes a silent encouragement, adding strength to the family. They knew that, even though they might not have all the answers, facing the truth and protecting their family was the most important thing at this moment. The Johnson family and Kite prepared to continue the investigation, determined to bring the hidden secrets of this criminal organization to light. Bob and Martha sat in the living room, surrounded by the latest documents, while Kite lay quietly beside Sarah, his eyes constantly watching the family's every move, as though ready to protect them. Sarah felt safe with Kite by her side, but she couldn't deny the anxiety growing inside her about what would happen next. ChatGPT said, "Bob," staring at a piece of paper in his hand, "the deeper we get into this investigation, the more we get tangled in these unexpected schemes. These people won't sit back, Martha. They won't stop just because we found a few documents." Martha, anxiously, her hands gripping the paper tightly. "Each clue leads us to even more dangerous people. I can't shake the feeling that they're watching us. And Sarah, how can we protect her?" Martha looked at Sarah, her worry clearly visible in her eyes. Sarah, though silent, felt a rush of emotions stir within her. She wasn't just afraid of what might happen to her family. She was worried for her own safety, for everything she had already been through. Bob, turning to Martha, his gaze resolute. "We have to continue, no matter the danger. We can't let them keep hiding the truth. We need to protect Sarah and protect this family. We can't let them control our lives." Just as Bob's words ended, a soft noise came from the window. Everyone in the room jumped and turned toward the sound. Kite immediately stood up, his eyes alert. Then he turned toward the window, his ears pricked as if he sensed something unusual. Sarah followed the dog's movement, feeling the tension in the air. Martha, breathing heavily. "Bob, this isn't right. I feel like something's off. We need to prepare for anything." Bob, standing up, his eyes now steely. "Exactly. We can't let ourselves become targets. Now's the time to show them we won't back down." While the Johnson family and Kite remained steadfast in their goal, the criminals were closing in, not just through the clues, but with direct threats. A sudden call came through, the voice on the other end cold and menacing. Voice on the phone. "You've gone too far. Don't keep going, or what happened to Lucy will be a real warning. Stop now, or you won't be able to save anyone anymore." The threat sent a chill through the room, making the atmosphere even more tense. Sarah felt the coldness in the space, but she also knew that her family and Kite wouldn't back down. No matter what these criminals tried, they would keep pushing forward to uncover the truth. Bob, clenching his fist, his voice lowering. "They won't dare do anything. We have to stand firm. We can't let them control our lives." Martha, nodding, though still worried, her eyes filled with determination. "That's right, Bob. We've come too far to turn back now. Sarah's been through enough. We won't let them win." Kite stood close to Sarah, but not just as a protector. He was a powerful presence, a light guiding the Johnson family as they faced the difficult challenges ahead. Sarah looked into Kite's eyes, and for the first time, she felt a surge of belief rising within her. Sarah, looking at Bob and Martha, her voice soft but firm. "We have to find out the truth. We can't let Lucy's sacrifice be in vain, and we will protect each other." Sarah's words shattered the heavy silence in the room. Despite the many threats still looming, the Johnson family and Kite were ready. They would continue the fight, not only to protect Sarah but also to protect everything that remained of their family. Bob stood up, gripping the chair in front of him. His emotions were tangled, but love and determination overcame the fear creeping into his heart. He looked at Martha, his gaze full of resolve. Bob, his voice deep but firm. "We can't back down anymore, Martha. It's been too long. These people can't keep threatening us. We have to fight. Martha, nodding, her breath heavy, but her eyes full of strength. I know, Bob. But with each passing day, I fear more for Sarah. What we're facing, and what we've lost. How can we protect her from all of this? Bob walked over to his wife, placing his hand on her shoulder, silent for a moment. He understood Martha's worry, but he also knew they couldn't allow themselves to live in fear forever. Every day was a missed opportunity to stand up for the truth, for justice. Bob, gently but with determination. We will protect her. We will protect our family, even if we have to face the worst. Lucy sacrificed for us. We won't let her death be in vain. Martha looked at Bob, her eyes shimmering with worry, but also containing an unexpected resilience. Even though the dangers were still there, she could feel the steadfastness in Bob's words. And more importantly, she felt her heart no longer weighed down by fear. Now, she too was ready to face whatever came their way. At the same time, Sarah sat beside them, her parents' words bringing a new breath into her heart. She no longer felt alone, no longer burdened by guilt. She felt the unconditional love and protection from her parents and from Kite. Every time this German Shepherd was near, Sarah felt the fear fading away. Kite wasn't just an invisible protector. He was an immense source of strength for her. Sarah, speaking, her voice soft but filled with resolve. I can't live in the past anymore. I'll live strong for Lucy, for our family. Martha, looking at Sarah, her eyes warm and proud. We won't let anyone hurt you again. This family will protect you, even if we have to face every danger. In that moment, Sarah felt a steadying strength in her heart. No more apologies, no more guilt holding her back. Facing the pain and loss, Sarah began to find a new strength. The pride she felt for Lucy, her sister's sacrifice, began to fill her heart. She knew that nothing could stop her now, nothing could pull her back into the fear that Lucy had protected her from. Kite stood silently beside Sarah, his eyes full of love and patience. That silent presence was invaluable to Sarah. A friend without words, yet the greatest source of encouragement in the hardest moments. Sarah, looking at Kite, whispering, Thank you, Kite. I know I'm not alone anymore. Kite gently wagged his tail, as if responding to her. No words were needed, just his presence. Kite was the connection binding the Johnson family together. With Kite by her side, Sarah knew that she could now face the past, not only to free herself but also to uncover the truth about Lucy's death. Sarah, looking into Kite's eyes, whispering, Thank you, Kite. I know I'm not alone anymore. Kite wagged his tail again, like a silent answer. His presence alone was enough. Kite was the constant companion, the protector Sarah needed. Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak, the memories that had always lingered in her mind starting to flow out. Though her voice still trembled, it was stronger than ever before. Sarah. That day, Lucy and I were on our way home. The day was pretty quiet. I wasn't thinking much, just looking forward to getting home, playing for a bit, and having dinner. But then, that car came speeding up from behind. As Sarah spoke of the car, a hint of fear flashed in her eyes. But strangely, when she thought of Lucy, she felt warmth, as though Lucy was still there, protecting her. Sarah. Lucy suddenly pushed me aside. I didn't understand what was happening. We only had a few seconds to react, and then Lucy got hit by the car. I still hear her scream, but everything went blurry when I saw her lying on the ground. Each part of the story Sarah told was a piece of the puzzle she had never dared to face before. What happened? The fear, the silence, the pain of loss, everything rose up within her. But now as she spoke, something had changed. There was no guilt, no fear anymore. Only the truth, Lucy's sacrifice, and the gratitude Sarah felt for her sister. Sarah. She didn't just save me. She sacrificed herself so I could live. It wasn't an accident, I know that. She protected me, and I can't let her death be in vain. As Sarah spoke these words, her voice deepened, but there was a resolve in every word. Sarah hadn't just freed the memories in her heart, but she had also freed herself from the guilt that had weighed her down for so long. She felt, even though Lucy's death was an unspeakable pain, that sacrifice had made her understand something crucial. Her life had to have meaning. It had to continue for those she loved and for Lucy. Sarah. I can't live in this pain forever. I have to find out the truth, so everyone knows what Lucy did, and I will live to honor her. Each word Sarah spoke was a stronger step in her journey. She was no longer the lonely child haunted by the past. Sarah now knew that she could uncover the truth about Lucy's death, about everything that had happened to her family. The Johnson family listened to every word Sarah said. They didn't speak, but in their eyes were pride, hope, and faith. The evidence about Lucy's death, the clues they had gathered, everything is slowly becoming clearer. Sarah's story is not just a recount of the past, but a powerful message that no matter how painful it may be, they must continue living, uncover the truth, and protect their family. Martha, after listening, took Sarah's hand, her eyes filled with emotion. Martha, with a choked voice. She always loved you, Sarah, and you will never disappoint her. We will find the truth, and we will bring Lucy to justice. The whole family stood there, together, feeling the bond, the strength they had found in their struggles. Sarah no longer felt weak or guilty. She felt her own strength, a strength that only love and sacrifice could provide. Sarah, looking into Kite's eyes softly, "Thank you, Kite. I can't do this alone. But with you by my side, I know I will find the truth." Kite looked at her, his eyes shining and wagging his tail lightly, as if saying, "We'll do this together." This feeling wasn't about rigidity, but a warmth full of love, making Sarah feel steadier, stronger. The journey to uncover the truth that Sarah was about to embark on was no longer a burden, but a mission she could undertake with Kite's silent support. Sarah's recounting not only helped her release the secrets that had been weighing on her heart, but it was also an important part of the Johnson family's investigation. As Sarah spoke about what happened the day Lucy sacrificed herself, she no longer felt fear or guilt. She realized that telling the truth, even though painful, was the way to preserve Lucy's memory, to ensure her actions were not forgotten, and to bring the secrets surrounding Lucy's death to light. Sarah, continuing, her voice becoming calmer. "Lucy, she did everything for me. I have to live. I have to find the truth about her. She didn't die in vain. I won't let that happen." Every word Sarah spoke was a step forward, stepping out of the shadow of the past. The painful memories no longer consumed her. Instead, they were replaced by strong resolve and pride in her sister's sacrifice. The entire Johnson family stood there, silently listening to Sarah's story. In each of their hearts, the pain still lingered, but they sensed something new forming, hope, a new beginning. The evidence Sarah provided was the crucial piece that brought them closer to justice. The information Sarah shared helped piece together the fragments of truth they had been searching for all this time. Bob, with a determined look, nodded. "Sarah, you are not alone in this fight. We will walk this road together, not just for you, but for Lucy, too." Bob's words strengthened the family. They knew that, even when facing evil and danger, they would not stop. Everything was for one single purpose: to bring justice to Lucy, so her sacrifice would never be forgotten. And with Kite's help, their family wasn't just searching for the truth. They were finding the strength to continue living, walking stronger in this challenging journey. Sarah felt the warmth from her father's words, the support of her family, and, above all, the steadfastness from Kite. She no longer felt lost among the painful memories. With Kite by her side, she could face the past and look toward a new future where justice would be served and Lucy would be remembered as a hero. Sarah, whispering gently, "Sis, I know you did everything for me. You didn't die in vain." Her words, soft yet heavy, felt like a burden that had been carried for so long was finally being set down. Sarah wasn't just speaking the truth about Lucy's sacrifice, it was also a promise she was making to herself. The sense of pride instead of guilt now filled her heart. Sarah understood that Lucy's sacrifice was the guiding light leading her forward, not only to continue living but also to honor her sister. Sarah was no longer just a survivor. She realized that she could do more than that. With Kite's help, the memories Sarah had buried no longer haunted her. They had been unlocked, and each memory, though painful, made her stronger. She knew now that she could continue living, facing every challenge without fear. Looking into Kite's eyes, Sarah saw patience and unconditional love. Kite didn't speak, but those eyes seemed to always be ready to listen, ready to share the burden Sarah had carried all this time. The safety she felt from Kite made Sarah realize she no longer had to face the shadows of the past. She wouldn't live in sorrow anymore, nor would she allow guilt to claim her heart. A feeling of freedom slowly began to creep into Sarah's soul. She realized she was no longer a victim of the past. Her journey from painful memories to acceptance and forgiveness now had a clear purpose: to uncover the truth, bring justice to Lucy, and live a life that her sister had sacrificed for her to live. Bob's words were a great source of encouragement. "We'll do everything for you, for Lucy." Now, Sarah felt that she could continue living, not only for Lucy, but also for herself. Things wouldn't be easy, but she knew she would never be alone. She had her family, Kite, and the people who loved her by her side. Sarah, looking up at the sky, her eyes filled with faith. "I'll live strong, just like you did. You'll never be forgotten." Although the future was still full of challenges, Sarah knew that she now had enough strength to face them. Kite had completed his mission. After all the trials and battles, this German Shepherd was no longer a soldier, but an irreplaceable member of the Johnson family. Now, after fighting for justice and protecting the ones he loved, Kite had officially retired, becoming a loyal companion and a symbol of sacrifice for this family. After all the turmoil, the Johnson family found the peace they had longed for. The tension, anxiety, and sleepless nights spent mourning Lucy's loss gradually faded away. Sarah no longer felt guilt, and Bob and Martha no longer struggled with self-blame. They found peace when they looked into the loyal eyes of Kite, and that allowed them to begin anew. Kite was more than just a dog. He had become an essential member of the Johnson family, the loyal companion who stood by their side through every storm. The family understood the profound value Kite brought to their lives, and they decided to hold a ceremony to honor him for all he had done for them. Martha and Bob stood side by side, looking at Kite, their eyes filled with deep gratitude. They were grateful not only for the accomplishments Kite had made during his military service, but also for the unwavering love and loyalty he had shown to their family. Sarah, though still carrying the scars of the past, felt a sense of lightness in her heart. Thanks to Kite, she had overcome her fears, faced the past, and found peace once again. The Johnson family would never forget what Kite had done for them, and today's ceremony would be the occasion to express their gratitude. Kite was their pride, a symbol of loyalty and sacrifice, not just in work, but in family love. On the day of the ceremony, the Johnsons gathered in the yard, where a small statue of Kite stood. It was carved to depict the dog standing tall, with determined eyes and firm feet. The statue wasn't just a keepsake, but a symbol of everything Kite had brought to their lives. The ceremony began with the arrival of family members and old friends of Bob and Martha, those who had witnessed Kite's sacrifice during the journey to uncover the truth about Lucy's death. A simple yet emotional ritual took place. A medal was awarded to Kite for his loyalty, sacrifice, and the protection he had provided to the Johnson family. Bob's speech was filled with emotion. He stood up, his eyes brimming with tears, as he spoke of everything Kite had done. We can't imagine life without Kite. He wasn't just a protector, he was a companion, always by our side during our hardest times. He helped us overcome the pain of loss, conquer our fears, and find peace. Martha also shared her thoughts. Kite helped Sarah find herself again. To us, Kite isn't just a dog, he's a family member, an amazing friend, not just through battles, but through every moment of our lives. Kite stood silently throughout the ceremony, his eyes watching everyone as though he understood everything they were saying. The ceremony was not only a thank you for what Kite had done, but a reaffirmation that this dog would always be an inseparable part of the Johnson family. The awarding of the medal ended with a round of applause. The family members could all feel the warmth emanating from Kite's heart, as though promising that he would always protect them, always be their loyal companion through any trial. After the ceremony, the Johnsons felt as if a weight had been lifted off their shoulders. Bob and Martha looked back on the journey they had been through, realizing they had overcome the greatest challenge of their lives. They had faced the pain of loss, fought for justice for Lucy, and found peace in their hearts. And most importantly, they realized that with Kite by their side, they could continue to live, protect each other, and overcome any difficulty. Martha squeezed Bob's hand, their eyes filled with emotion. She said, "We did it, Bob. We made it through everything, thanks to Kite. Thank you for always being there for us." Bob looked at Martha, smiling with a sense of satisfaction and relief. "We fought for what was right, for justice for Lucy and for this family, and now, with Kite by our side, we will never be alone again." Sarah, despite having endured so much pain, now felt a new sense of hope in her heart. She knew that she no longer had to live in the shadow of the past. Thanks to Kite, she had overcome her feelings of guilt and felt proud of Lucy's sacrifice. She had found the strength to move forward in her new life, with the goal of honoring Lucy and continuing to live for herself. The entire family stood together, looking ahead, knowing that they would always have Kite by their side. The dog was not just a protector, but a part of the family, always with them through every moment, helping them to stay strong and loving. At the end of their arduous journey, the Johnson family had found peace in their lives. The challenges and losses they had faced helped them understand the value of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Kite, the German Shepherd, was not just a protector, but a symbol of sacrifice and loyalty. The presence of this dog in their lives had not only helped them overcome the days of sorrow, but had also brought hope and faith in a brighter future. Sarah, after years of living with guilt and haunting memories, had finally regained her confidence and found a new purpose in life. She had boldly walked past the past to live fully with her own love and resilience, honoring Lucy's sacrifice. With Kite by their side, the Johnson family would always face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. Just as Kite had taught them,